first time ever.
Hear you loud and clearly.
And it was going place.
That stuff's great.
But the game is not a roguelike.
Boomer shooter.
Bang.
Hello, this is John St. John, and you're listening to KEEP In the Keep, bringing you all the hits from the finest in the world of gaming and entertainment. Now sit back and relax as the drowned god Cthulhu lulls your mind with the tastiest talk in town.
Welcome to another chapter of In the Keep podcast. I'm your very own prophet of the drowned god, the Motherlode. The Keep is a collective of gaming enthusiasts compelled by the drowned god Cthulhu to frag and jib one another into oblivion for all eternity. Alright, what's up, gamers? I guess it's important for me to say early here before we get started. If you tuned in for specifically gaming content, this ain't your week. Sorry. We're interviewing Chris Heist, who is a comedian that I met at a bar in downtown Tucson. And while we do talk about gaming, you'll get to the gaming content roughly about an hour. It's like 50-something minutes in. If you want to skip to that, that's cool. But this is not going to be an easy episode. It's a good one. It's a really good one in my opinion. But you know, usually we don't talk about politics or the government or things that upset people on the show. This time we do a lot, very much so. And I just want to warn you ahead of time. Like if you came here just to hear about video games, this might not be the one for you. But if you came here to hear extremely interesting, introspective conversation about the way that the world works and potentially how it influences video games, then stick around. But for now, I'll play you out, and you'll soon be in the keep with Chris Heist. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Chris Heist. How are you?
I'm all right. How you doing?
It's a pretty good day, man. It's fall now, so I went out and bought the fucking Sam Adams, sweater weather pack. Got my Oktoberfest on.
Okay, drinking beer on a Sunday at noon.
That's
good.
how I do it.
Yeah, no, it's good.
But,
any time of day. Fuck it.
well, it's like I woke up really, really early because, like I said, my job is technically in Europe. So though I live in Arizona, I wake up on European time to work with those people. And
that's pretty cool. That's pretty fucking cool.
It's pretty chill. Yeah. And so it's funny though, when you walk into the gas station at 8 a.m. and everyone's getting their coffee and I'm just like, yes, 1 24 pack of beer, please.
Right. No, yeah. No, I've always been off schedule from the normal whatever. So oftentimes I'm waking up at 3:30 a.m. to do shit. And by the time 8 rolls around, you're like already have been doing shit for a long time.
Yeah, I feel like the 24 pack of beer under your arm is the last reason why people are staring at you. Like,
yeah, for me, yeah. But that's all right. That's part, that's people. They, it's a, I guess, for the longest, through human history, people are stuck with norms.
Yeah. Having spent most of my adult life in a very rigid environment, when I saw you on stage, I was like, this guy is an animal. He's my hero. I want to be just like that.
What? I mean, that I have gone to whatever in my experience, gone to great lengths to prevent myself from being locked in rigid systems, but it has not done well for me. I can say that. I have not been successful. I mean, I think personally it has done well for me. Like I think mentally, I love what I think and the freedom. But I'm just saying, like it doesn't. You don't do well necessarily with jobs or relationships or when you speak your mind freely all the time. It tends to piss people off more so. So it's not just on stage that I do that, but it's I like it, but it's not for. I would like it to be more for everybody, but I understand why people don't do it, because there are downside effects to it.
I think that most people are who they are in an effort to not go against the tribe because they're afraid of being judged or ostracized or whatever. And I don't think that's a unique thought. It's just an observational fact about a social species, really.
Yeah, it takes a lot of effort to not to just stand out or be different just for the sake of being different, whatever. But if you think something is accurate in a certain direction and everyone else is like, no, it's not, then it's up to, it takes whatever, what they would call it, I don't know, a gumption or something. I don't know what the fuck they would say. Some sort of cojones or whatever to be like, look, I think this is right, or I think this is more accurate than what the fuck you people are saying is more accurate. And you stand up for, as opposed to just falling into line with the, what is that famous psychology experiment where...
the Stanford prison experiment?
Not that one. There's many famous, but that's one of them. But the one I'm thinking of is just the everyone's an actor in a room except for one person who's the subject of the study, and the teacher has on a chalkboard, they draw 4 different lines and they say which line is the longest line, and everybody in the room agrees that the wrong answer is correct, and the person who's there is studied to see if they will go along with that or if they will say no, clearly line D is the longest line. But everybody else says that line C is the longest line. And most participants, I forget what the exact percentage was, but I think it was most, if not many, people were just like, yeah, they just went along with the crowd. They were just like, yeah, line C is the longest line, even though it was totally fucking obvious that it wasn't. So it's that kind of thing. Like there's a tendency for people to lie in defense of their social well-being and their
survival mechanism.
Yeah, exactly. Because we're social animals, and there is a very important component to, whatever is built into our evolution that we're scared shitless of being ostracized. So and we also, not everybody's an arrogant prick. Like there are some people would be like, well, maybe I do see that line D is long. It's way longer than the other lines, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I fucking drank too much coffee today or something. Maybe I'm wrong. There is something to be said for, there's a good impulse there too, not just an evil impulse of, most of the people probably did it just to conform, but maybe a few people were like, I'm sometimes wrong about shit, so I'm going to go with the crowd on this one.
The elevator experiment. Remember that is like an old TV sketch where everyone's in an elevator people facing the back wall.
Yeah.
And then the one guy is just like, they're just laughing at him as he slowly turns around to conform.
Right. Yeah, that's one of those old tricks. The sociology experiments or whatever. And the stuff that Candid Camera, that old show, was made of.
I think that was Candid Camera.
Yeah, probably. It was started. I think that show was started by a psychologist who had worked on this sort of fuckery, and they kind of monetized it and made a show about it, not just to entertain the public, but to educate the public, and maybe also probably manipulate the public.
So how did you end up? What was the moment when you kind of started to lean this way, or like to value your freedom over your, we'll say, social safety? I mean,
the freedom was just like from as early on as I can remember.
Yeah,
is just like that's one of the best parts of whatever consciousness, is being free to think whatever and to try things out, say whatever, experiment in the world or whatever, and without not living in a cage, basically. So there was definitely that whatever obsession with freedom. Every kid hates school or whatever because it's like a fucking prison. It's the way it's designed, the way everybody loves learning, but they hate being thrown in a cage to do it. So I get, I think it's a universal kind of feeling of it's just that most people don't get the chance to whatever. And I don't know that I had the chance to, but I certainly tried to get as much freedom as I possibly could. Given everybody's confined to the authority of their parents to some degree, and everybody's confined to the authority of schools and government to whatever degree. And, you learn to work within those parameters and expand them as much as you can. I guess everybody, to whatever extent, succeeds to varying extents. Because I think as a species, and I think just in life in general, and connected to the second law of thermodynamics, everybody seeks to increase their degrees of freedom. So it's a very important, and actually, yeah, as I just kind of referred to, is a fundamental aspect of physical reality, all the way down to the very base fundamental principles of physics. Like, it doesn't matter if you're a human being or a rabbit or a fucking subatomic particle, you're trying to increase your degrees of freedom. So it's like it's a thing that is yeah, I think it's innate to yeah, life, and even not life in a lot of ways, weirdly. But yeah, it's important. And so yeah, I've always, tried to, and then yeah, once you start learning shit later when you're older or whatever, because I didn't, I knew some shit as a kid, but not a lot, but the more you learn about how the world is and how the world is, that whole, there's that thing, the first time a kid realizes their parents are wrong about something, it's like this mind-blowing event. And they're like,
it's like every like suburban kid who's like, hesitant to try pot in college, and then they do, and they realize that like, oh shit, they lied, and then they think they lied about everything, and
right,
they go straight to heroin.
Right, exactly. Yeah. That whole thing of like, that's another one of those things, mistakes where people can be wrong about shit, but that doesn't mean they're wrong about everything. But they can, yeah, they were wrong about pot, but they were lying about pot. And they weren't lying about heroin.
This is not an original thought, because it actually came from Jack Spirko, who's like he's a podcaster that I listen to a lot, but he talked about the public education system. And he's like, we don't actually, in America, there is no public education system. It is actually a government indoctrination system. It's not public. Parents are like, you have to go through the office and get like a name tag and be vetted in order to visit it. It's not public.
Right. Right.
Your children are being forced to be there, essentially.
Right. It's not like a library,
Right. Yeah. It's not a public business. Like, you're not the customer. The parent is not the customer. The government is the customer. The teachers get paid by the government, and so do the staff and everything. And then the parents really don't have any say in it. And they consider it a right. Like, it's the government's right to decide how your children should be educated, despite what you think.
Right. And you can go through the whatever, I don't know, bureaucratic process of homeschooling or whatever. I don't know how to configure that, but yeah. Generally speaking, public schooling is there's private schooling, and then there's public schooling that is in some way mandatory. Like you said, you have to go through some procedure where you do a homeschooling application and shit like that if you want to be the person to actually, but they do want, there's bad to it, because how rigid it is and how cage like it is and stuff. At the same time, we got enough people running around this country that don't know shit about science already. If there wasn't public schools, man, like this televangelist would have taken everybody.
Oh yeah, dude, Billy Graham.
All that shit. He would be God if there was no public school, because it would be so easy to fool everybody. Already, America's run, I would argue, based on the Barnum principle of like, make as many Barnums as possible and make as many suckers as possible, and that will maximize profit. I have a bit on a new thing that I'm trying to put together about that shit. But yeah, like it's we're trying to, we're not trying to. It's just a fucked system. It's a longer conversation, but it's an elaborate exploitation scheme. But yeah, I get the point. About public schools or whatever. But yeah, I just think that like without it's one of those old arguments of like the argument between authoritarianism and individualistic freedom sort of thing. It's like authoritarian means and schemes oftentimes emerge in a vacuum of a viable individualistic scheme. Right. So if there isn't already something that prevents televangelists from taking over the country by tricking everyone, that, or other things, corporations, whatever, McDonald's could do it. Any corrupt authoritarian organization and fucked up authoritarian leaders could take over if people were too dumb, if they were too ignorant. So how do you solve that? And the easiest, the path of least resistance solution is oftentimes for people to go, well, then we got to make it an authority that forces people to do that. Otherwise, these other crazies are going to force them to do this. So you get you get stuck in a loop of this bad is better than that bad. And I would argue that that's a function of the vacuum of other viable options and solutions, and that we need to start creating more of those more viable solutions to fill those vacuums before authority comes along and goes, we got to do it the hard way, or the mean way, or the rigid way. Because you could, there's, and this applies with everything, but like with education too, you could construct a system that makes people very, very knowledgeable about science and math very early, and history, so that they avoid the trickery and fuckery of all these horrible people and organizations. And you could do it without any authority at all. But it's not there. The internet is one such thing that is possible, has contributed to some extent in the other direction, to in that anti-authoritarian direction, to let people actually get to learn without force. And it's that kind of thing. And but in lieu of an option where people are going to be even dumber than they already are,
right?
And like you said, the whole public school system is not necessarily trying to make everyone into Ben Franklin. It's trying to make everyone, I argue in the bit I'm trying to write now that is nowhere near finished, it's trying to turn everyone into either a Barnum or a follower of Barnum, a dupe of Barnum.
Yeah.
So the smart people will turn into Barnums, and the vast majority of people who are less smart, it'll turn into suckers. And it'll output that as a profit scheme, as opposed to turning everyone as much as possible into fucking Thomas Paines and Ben Franklins and, Teslas and, fucking geniuses that invent shit. Instead of that, it would rather turn everyone into suckers and exploiters of suckers.
And at least in my observation, I grew up in South Alabama, so like the school system there was essentially like teaching you how to be an employee.
Yeah.
It does not teach you how to be a leader. It doesn't even teach you how to be an entrepreneur.
Right.
Like which is, in my mind, the best thing you could be is like someone who controls the, you own the monster
as independent. Yeah. As independent as possible. Yeah.
Right. But the entire system is like, if you show up on time and study pretty, just do okay, and then get into college and then get a job and then die. And that's the whole process.
Right.
And I've been fighting against that for ever since I guess the age of reason. I'm like, I don't like that at all. Like I want to be in charge of my own path. So it's, I don't want to call it slavery, but almost it's like this very subtle way to just kind of force you into, as you said, being one of the dupes.
Yeah, it channels people in, like you said, it channels them straight into a job, and usually a laborer type job. Like a lot of people are still advocating for vocational schools that even more funnels people, channels them directly into, you are coal miner, you are welder, you are, and it's just like, okay, what about if somebody wants to be a welder and 15 other things, and you teach them all the stuff so that they can learn whatever they want, along the way, and so that they can make crazy cool new shit that nobody's ever made before, because they have experience in 15 different things, and not just vocational things, but also very intellectual things, and high science and math engineering things. So there's a there's something, again, that freedom, but and from what I've read and heard from people, it's even more like that in Europe, where you are totally funneled straight into certain things based on your test results. And in America, and in America to some extent, depending again on the state and what the region's employment opportunities are. If you're in Boston, it's probably better than, or New York, probably better options as far as that's concerned than the rest of the country, because there's a lot more types of jobs in the area than there is in Arizona or Mississippi or Florida, where I grew up.
Well, when I grew up, it was like it was in Mobile, so it's a town where essentially every like the normal people, the base median, all the girls become nurses and all the boys become either shipyard workers or they work in a steel factory. And that's
Right.
just the easiest way to funnel right out of high school and make a living.
Right. And so that's what most people do. Yeah. It's the path of least resistance.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting shit, man.
Yeah. And
I admire the fact that you convey this so well. Like there's a lot of people like on stage that are shouting, like they just seem angry, but like when I'm paying attention to what you're saying, like, yeah, it's comedy, it's a joke, but I can see that you've thought this through, that you're going through this arduous process of like everything you say is an attempt to make some sort of sense, even if that is an attempt to piss people off with what you're saying so that you can then make a point.
Right. Which is not like, I know some comics do that. I'm actually trying to not piss people off. I just inadvertently do it all the time. But I'm not like, that's one of the weird things is like, I would like my stuff to be mainstream I would like to be mainstream, but I would like what I think to be accepted in the mainstream, but it's never going to be. But my point is that I don't think what I think is deviant or offensive or, immoral or treasonous, any of that stuff, it's just thought. It's just philosophical thought. We should think about all these things and make good and then better, progressively better decisions along the way because, human beings in thought and action are constantly confined to our current configurations of things to varying extents. And if we can't, you always are confined. There's always an exigency to some extent. There's always some sort of constraint for whether time or space that is making us have we only got so much time to make this decision. We have to make this decision by now. So it's going to be shittier than it needs to be. But then later you can revise that decision, revise and keep updating those things. So basically the way the universe works and the way time works or whatever is it makes it kind of inherently fucked up to some degree. So you have to do those. We have to select a shittier option. Temporarily though, most people once they get the shitty option locked in, they keep it locked in forever, but we have to constantly update our shitty option selections, previous shitty option selections, so that they're constantly improving. And if we can be smart enough about it, we can accelerate the improvement and prevent future time constraint related shitty option selecting based on, configuring things so that people aren't so constrained to time or space in their decision making. So you have enough time to really think things through and really elaborately predict what possibly could go wrong and what could go right and avoid the wrong and to the best of your ability increase the number of right outcomes or good outcomes from the decisions of again individual and society. It's just it's a big fucking
So what is it about stand-up comedy that you think like drew you in, and like is it
it's that part of it.
Need to get out there and say what you need to say to a group of people, or?
It's very much the just solving things. Mm-hmm. It's a very, to me, stand-up comedy is very similar to philosophy in a lot of ways, and even back in ancient history. So back in the day, in Greece or whatever, fucking thousands of years ago, you'd hear people just talk about shit, offer their ideas about shit, and sometimes be witty about it, and most of the time not. But, some of these fuckers wrote great literature as well as being great mathematicians and scientists. So they had that, what they would call a polymath educational upbringing, where they would, they weren't raised in a cage. They were encouraged to learn many different things, including how to work with stone and wood, but also how to do math and science, how to figure things out and invent things, make machines, and also discover whole new things about reality and nature. So that whole to me, stand-up comedy is a component of that, not perceived to be a component of that, but I consider stand-up to be very connected to science and philosophy and the communication of science and philosophy and I've always loved stand-up since I was a kid, and I was obsessed with Carlin and Pryor and then later, and when I was a kid, Dangerfield. And then as I was a little bit older, I was somewhere around 10 or 11 when I first heard Kinison. And then by the time I was first in college, I heard of Hicks and was listening to his shit all the time. And then Then later on, we're at Stanhope, and then and in the meantime, just had been listening to Carlin and so many others. But I have my favorites, and then once you get really into the depths of like where those guys, the fucking Mort Saul and Lenny Bruce, Dick Gregory, all those guys. So like you get like I always liked the stand-up comics that were more philosophers, and that dumb people really didn't like them because they considered it not funny. They would say that Carlin's right, but he's not funny. And I can get why somebody would think that, but they don't understand what funny is, because like to me, and it is a function of experience and knowledge, and like some of the most funny things are some of the most profound and true things, and that applies whether you're a dipshit fucking observational comic talking about some thing that everybody experiences with a refrigerator. Right. That's sort of shit. But like there is something to that is like a very stripped down, simplistic version of what I was just saying. Like, because there is a truth to the airline food thing. There's a small truth. It's just not really an important truth. But that's what I'm arguing, is that the core of what's funny is some unrevealed truth about something. And so whether it is about some unrevealed truth about tying your shoelaces, that's going to make money in America. If you're a fucking asshole comedian, jerk, fucking corporate douchebag that will just talk about shoelaces and refrigerators, and people will applaud you, and maybe you use a puppet or do magic too. It's one of those things that's going to get the biggest audience, but that's not the funniest thing. People will be laughing the hardest at that because most people are not as smart as it's just one of those things. Like, I'm not trying to be arrogant about it, but most people, there is a sort of pyramid of intelligence and experience and knowledge,
I would say that so Foxworthy, right? Like, he's not, I don't think he's malicious. I don't think he's sitting here plotting like, well, I'm going to censor myself so that I can.
Oh, no.
That's genuinely his experience. And like,
right. But there's also subconscious motivations and not so subconscious. I'm sure Foxworthy saw a number of comedians in the clubs back in the day not succeeding because of what they were talking about. And so he was like, I'm going to talk about the safe things. I'm trying to make money here, and a lot of it if I can. So here's what I'm going to talk, and that was a big movement during the late 70s and early 80s. A lot of comics steered hard right mainstream and and gave up on what Carlin was doing, or Pryor was doing, or Paul Mooney was doing. They saw Paul Mooney, one of the greatest comedians of all time. They saw him regularly not succeeding, other than being in Richard Pryor movies and writing with him, but which was great. But they saw him being rejected by different authorities in the business, so they were probably like, I'm not going to go the route of criticizing all these institutions of authority like Mooney does all the time so hilariously. He's literally one of the funniest people who has ever lived, and hardly anybody knows about him because the American authorities were like, we're not going to make this fucking guy famous. This guy is super funny and super insightful. And so a lot of those guys back in the day were like, let's talk about shopping malls. Let's talk about, fucking whatever, bread. But my original point is that there is that what's funny is a fundamental truth about something.
Yeah.
But a fundamental truth about, fucking shopping malls that is not critical of shopping malls is not going to be very funny when you really think about it. But most people don't really think about it. They just kind of like, they want to get have easy listening entertainment. So that's going to be what they get. And in a country that wants to foster that and not support anything that's critical, they're going to make the most money. So even if there's no like evil plotting by people like Foxworthy or other mainstream comedians, there is subconscious incentives and conscious incentives of seeing the people who succeed and the people who don't. And going like, these are the guys. I don't want to say what they're saying. People learn, whether they realize it or not, where the boundaries are, which is kind of what we were talking about before about your freedom. Is like in our society, what can I not talk about around these people? Whether it's family, whether it's certain friends, whether it's certain whatever coworkers, certain whatever subset of social life they're in, they learn whether they realize it or not. Oh, when I'm around grandma, I don't talk about anal sex. When I'm around, the pastor, I don't make jokes about pastors fucking kids. They should, but they learn not to do that. Like if knowing what I know now, I would make so many jokes about that. I'd get in so much trouble as a kid. But yeah, it would be like, any sort of, you don't. It's the classic. I mean, the classic where there's immediate repercussions is you don't go to the airport and go through the X-ray machine and make a joke about having a gun.
That's a Carlin joke, right?
I don't know if it's probably, but yeah, it's basically like I remember hearing about a kid when I was a kid. I remember hearing about a kid who did that. A kid I knew I didn't know him well, but like I knew he was in school with me, and he had gone to jail because he did that. And yeah, so it was like one of those things that the parents tried to scare the other kids, like, you saw what happened to that fucking idiot. Don't do that. So there's also a line of like what, and some of those boundaries that we learn are very good because I mean, I love fucked up jokes, but I'm not going to go taunting. I'm not going to walk into a police station and start going, "Hey, you remember the first Terminator movie? You remember when he came in the police station and killed all the cops? That was fucking hilarious, wasn't it?" You don't do that because it's not going to be a good reaction to that because they're going to assume that you're crazy and that there's like an implied threat there. But when you're on a stand-up stage, the implied threat is no longer there.
One of your jokes that really stood out to me was the one about you acknowledge at first that you were literally talking to a room full of other comics, right? Like it's a small
right
area. And you say, okay, so you guys all pretty much agree with the freedom of speech and freedom of expression. They're all like, yeah. And then you're like, okay, so you should be able to say anything you want. And they're like, yeah, of course. And then you say, what about racial slurs? And then there's just this awkward shift in the atmosphere of the room.
Yeah. And then at one point, one of the other comics points out that like, this is so awkward.
Yeah, you can hear them in the recording. Like, oh, this is bad. Like,
yeah, because they don't really believe. But that's the thing. And I'm no fan of the fucking comics that use racial slurs. But at times in history, it has been put to great anti-racist use. So you can't ban it completely. Comics like George Carlin and I mean, even, Louis C.K. in most recent history, but like have used it to a very intelligent effect. Now, most comics, they want to be those guys and they're newer or less experienced, whatever. They'll go on stage and say shit that's horrifically ignorant because they're trying to do what people who are super geniuses are doing and they can't. And they don't know that not to try it until you can at least make a good attempt at it. And and to some extent, there's always going to be that. But, it's one of those, that's like the line of lines or whatever of like, comics will say, oh yeah, we believe in free speech. And I go, yeah. Oh, what about this? And they're like, well, no. Right.
There's certainly like you have the freedom to do whatever you want. And I think that to some extent, Louis C.K. probably couldn't have gotten to the point where he was telling that joke and it was funny if he had not been given the opportunity to try it and fail.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. And most clubs were at least okay with him or knew him because at that time, when he first did it, he wasn't really that famous. So, and actually when he first did it, it was his second special that I know of. It was his second special, because I don't know before he started recording stuff, how often he did this thing, but like one of his most famous bits of doing that where he's talking about white people and their ignorance. But in that process, he used white people's favorite racial slur. And which is what I call in the albums or whatever, he was already famous with his fans enough that when he did it, he was recording a special, but he worked it out in the clubs. So he had already had one successful special and he had fans that were filling the rooms in the comedy clubs. So it was more difficult for the comedy club owners to be the douchey fucking, I don't know if you, how people probably don't have experience with club owners, but the nature of it's understandable. If you're a bar or you're a comedy club, you don't want people saying horrible shit that makes everybody run out.
I experienced, I've never even attempted or cared to put myself in the position of being a stand-up comedian, but I spent some time when I was, like 17 to 20, pursuing the professional wrestling business. And I know you don't believe that because of how small I am, but I really did.
No, I can see it, like some Rey Mysterio shit or something.
And
he was not a big guy, right? He was.
No, he's about my height, maybe a little shorter than I am, but he was also jacked to the gills. And I was a lot more into weightlifting, in my younger days. But the point being that the level of tolerance of extreme misbehavior that you would see in the locker room because someone drew a crowd was insane, right? Like if you were a former WWE guy who was wrestling on the independent circuit and they knew that your name on the marquee was selling, you could be bad. You could be like not even good at your job at all. And you could have a briefcase full of drugs and you could, anything you wanted and just demand bullshit. And then people would be like, well, but we kind of have to let them do that.
Right. And they would treat people poorly. And it was an excuse. That was the power that they had. So people were, and I wasn't necessarily saying that like Louis was doing that. I was saying more like that. He had the freedom to try much more crazy shit because the club owners couldn't, at that moment at least, make the economic argument that, hey, you're scaring our customers out with your crazy shit you're saying. Yes. You can't do that because he brought by that point, because he was so regionally successful at least and had that first special out, he could maybe not 100% of the people were there just to see him, but 60, maybe 80% were. So the club owner couldn't be like, fuck this guy, kick him off stage, because if he did that, he'd just walk across the street and so would everyone in the crowd. So there is something to be said, for if you've got enough of an audience already where they allow you to do that. Because, most people, I still get shit at open mics. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised. That's why oftentimes open mics turn into booked shows and not open mics, is because the businesses fear what any stupid person might get on stage and say. And I get why, because if somebody goes on and starts saying horrible shit, then it's possible all of their customers will leave and they won't sell drinks that night. At the same time, don't say it's a comedy club or don't have an open mic if it's if it's not open. If you're gonna micromanage and tell people not to fucking say certain things or broach certain subjects, or so it's a difficult thing, again, based on how experienced the comic is and the fact that you need the freedom in order to do it, but yet most people don't have the experience to do it well, so it is going to piss people off. But that's part of the necessary pool of experience generating atmosphere that is necessary to really make the Louis C.K. thing or the Chris Rock thing or whatever it is that they originally might not have been, whatever, to expand into these legendary bits or whatever that really both make people laugh and enlighten people or whatever,
Do you feel that, like in your own act, that club owners, don't want you around because of
constantly?
Yeah, like
constantly.
It certainly would appear that way.
Yeah, it's just in my experience. I've been, doing stand-up for technically like almost 8 years, and doing before that yelling in metal bands and punk bands and hardcore bands for another fucking 15 years. And even that, you say shit in between songs about political shit, anti-war, whatever, and people get pissy. So I had already a lot of experience with that. But yeah, since doing stand-up, I was trying to do the math, roughly approximating the other day. It's probably between a quarter and a third of every venue I've ever performed at eventually banned me from performing at it, just based on what they usually say. They were nice about it. They were like, look, it's just bad for business. It's just, we can't have people railing against this, and this. You got to be funny and stupid funny and acceptable funny and blah, blah, blah. We don't want, so it's pretty much, even ones that were very supportive years later, eventually somebody else took over the show or something like that, and they banned me from performing. So it's somewhere between a fourth and a third of every venue I've ever performed at eventually said, you can't perform here anymore.
So, I think I know the answer to the question already, but like, do you think that there is an extent to where you can work your way in, like infiltrate and then turn once you've gained that audience, or is it just kind of a?
Well, I mean, there's that whole thing. Do you have to be Ray Romano until you have an audience and then turn into fucking Carlin? No.
Yeah.
There are certain people who did that or tried to do that, and it's just varying degrees of success. But really, even back in the day, Carlin did the opposite. He was hardcore critical of things in his stand-up, and then became kind of cheeseball-ish, and was kind of successful with that, and then went back to what he was doing. People think it often he was cheeseball and then became super critical of everything, but he started out super critical of everything, and that's what actually got him his start. He was part of a 2-man group, and he and his partner were doing some really fucking awesome shit, critical of like this in 1958 or something, 1961. They're out there criticizing KKK and making fun of whatever, the church and shit like that. And they were ordinarily, they would have faced difficulties as far as work is concerned, except at that time, there were comics that fostered that environment. And who got them a record deal? Fucking Lenny Bruce got them a Lenny. Mort Saul was like, yeah, these guys. And then later, eventually they even helped them out even further in getting Pryor and Carlin in touch with Steve Allen, who ran a Tonight Show kind of show back in the day, and other people to put them on TV, because those people originally put Mort Saul and Lenny Bruce on TV. So when there were comics that gave a shit and knew how much pressure there was forcing back on like any comic that was going to be smart and funny about really fucked up shit and shit that the establishment doesn't want you to even bring up, let alone ridicule, then it's I would argue it takes those other comics sometimes to put their finger on the scale and kind of push back against the inevitabilities of the dynamics of a corporate or even government predominantly run society, authoritarian in any sense, that would restrict certain views from being public, because they used their power to kind of lift voices that would have never been heard. Now later, again, Carlin became much more mainstream, although he was still subversive to a certain extent, just more subtly so. And then he later became much more openly so again.
Like in his later years, it wasn't even really a stand-up comedy show anymore.
That's what people think. But but I still think it is. I think it's the best. I think it's some of the best stand-up ever recorded. But a lot of people don't think it was that good or funny or whatever, but I think it's as funny as shit, even though I like his other shit. It was as if he had honed down his best bits from the 60s and 70s and just expanded upon a number of more ideas into some legendary shit that honestly makes most people very uncomfortable and sad and angry. It doesn't make most people laugh, but the people who know about those things and are really into ridiculing those things, it's some of the most profound, and therefore because of that, the most funny shit. Again, like I said, once if you're talking about if you're revealing a profound truth about refrigerators, it's not that hard to do. People have experienced, a lot of people could do that, but not everybody can reveal a profound truth about organized religion or government or military or corporate abuses of power. And Carlin could, and did it so effectively and humanity too, just talking about human nature, that it horrified people. And so even if they could laugh at it at some point, they just couldn't fucking hear the subject matter. But as you were saying before, I wanted to say, because the point is important, because recently a venue told me this, and I was very surprised to hear it. But they were saying, everybody I think is familiar with Bill Hicks, who's a great comic also, who fucking criticized a lot of shit and was very fucking funny doing it. Although a lot of people,
despite all that, his best bit is the one about Elvis giving away free Cadillacs.
Right. Yeah, but at the same time, like, he has such a high percentage of amazing shit compared to any other comedian that ever lived, that it's like, he's one of the greatest of all time. And most people listening, if you put most Americans in a movie theater and had them watch his shit, they'd be like, they might laugh occasionally, but this guy's not that funny, because they're used to fucking Ray Romano or whatever. So, but my point is that this venue was like, yeah, because I was having a productive discussion with the people there and going like, why aren't more venues cool with things, and they were like, yeah, Bill Hicks wouldn't make it today. He wouldn't be allowed to perform in any club in America, and he certainly wouldn't be in any success. Now, he wasn't very successful here. He was very successful in Britain, but he was successful enough here that he was able to do the touring circuit and, make whatever, hundreds of dollars a night playing each fucking venue or whatever. But now the corporate environment, just the obsession with pleasing the masses and pleasing everyone and not offending any one idiot in the crowd has gotten to such an extent that, this person was like, Bill Hicks wouldn't make it today at all. And when I heard him say it, he didn't say it like this was a bad thing. He said it that this is a good thing. It's good because he was the venue. So he was saying this is a good thing. This is a guy who I would think is a total fan of Bill Hicks. And yet, because he represents his other interests, was like, no, he would never make it today. And that's a good thing, because we shouldn't have people like ranting on stage about shit and pissing people off. We should have people on stage who are pleasing everyone in the crowd. That's what this fucking actually, and that's a prevailing opinion in the wider culture, in the broader, whether it's bars or comedy clubs, but especially comedy clubs. They've like all the landlocked comedy clubs have turned into cruise ship comedy clubs. Like the famous stereotype about cruise ship comedy being like, for elderly morons, and the dumbest. Even Jeff Dunham would be like, that's some dumb shit. Like that's some simplistic shit right there. Even Ray Romano would be like, this is too tame. This is way too family friendly. The shit that goes on there. Now they've transformed so that almost every comedy club in the country is pumping that sort of shit. You'll occasionally have someone that goes through who's kind of controversial, but only because they have a huge audience already. I don't think they're engendering any further like next generation of comics that are coming up. In that sense, they seem to be vastly incentivizing the opposite, for people to be less aggravating, less confrontational or whatever. So in that sense, I feel it's a danger to the culture of America and to the freedom. We're getting a lot of watered down shit, and nobody sees the fucking hot dogs, how they're being made behind the scenes.
I would just to give him some respect, like Jeff Dunham, while I don't think he ever said anything, at least in his specials that I've seen, that was like prolific. Sort of his genius to some extent was that while he represents this really, clean cut, lovable guy that the entire audience can vibe with and whatever,
right.
Dumb grandma can get along, he would use that puppet Walter as like his way of saying all the offensive things that he wanted to say, but
right.
It's not his fault. It's the puppet's fault.
Right. That's
trick,
one of the advantages of the puppet is deflecting, the blame to a third party. And I'm not knocking, like Jeff Dunham is a successful comic. I'm just saying he made the choice of going the mainstream route. And that's partly because he's a puppet. Puppet act is not likely to. I mean, I guess there's been a couple through the years that did really obscene shit, and it was funny because it was like kind of like a kids show that was all fucked up or whatever. But like the Dunham is like he's definitely. I'm not saying he's terrible. I'm just saying he's really good at what he does, and what he does is the stuff that is palatable and enjoyable for the majority in any country. It would be the kind of stuff that works the best, and it would be it's the kind of thing. Even though he's very, it's like Gallagher used to smash fucking smash fruit on stage or whatever, like that, and he used to occasionally have a profound line or something. Like he would do some stand up. He was technically a competent stand up. Some would say very good, but it wasn't, he was trying to sell tickets. He wasn't trying to fucking change things. He wasn't a philosopher about it. He was He was a businessman about it. He was an entertainer about it. And he recognizes at a certain point, in order to entertain and sell the most tickets and get the most people, then gimmicks work. Whether the gimmick is a puppet or the gimmick is a sledgehammer smashing watermelons or the gimmick is a fucking doing magic tricks while you're doing stand-up or the gimmick. The gimmick is something that brings people in because they're used to that other shit. When they were a kid, they saw puppet shows. They liked puppet shows. So now let's watch one, that we can, people want something they can watch with their kids, which is also a problem because we're such a fundamentalist religious country that, you can watch fucked up shit with your kids, but most people don't. They don't, to teach them about, this is what the world is like. You should probably try to make the world a better place than what it is, but you have to know about, you watch The Godfather with your kid who's 8, this is some fucked up shit, but you can explain everything along the way, or you can totally shelter and hold your kid back from the perception of reality as long as possible. But then they're not going to, first of all, they're going to be fucked over by people repeatedly because they're unaware of all the corrupt shit in the world. But secondly, they're also not going to succeed in a world, they're less likely to, at least, that they're not familiar with the underlying processes of.
I remember my grandmother is really cool, right? She listens to the show. So first of all, hey, Mama, how are you doing?
Oh, hey.
But she and I were watching Reservoir Dogs together one day.
Hell yeah.
And then when it's over, she says, like, that was a good movie, but I wish they didn't cuss so much. And I looked at her and I was like, Mama, what do you think bank robbers talk like? Do you think that, or like, I guess they're jewel thieves in this movie, but like, what do you think criminals, how do you think they speak to each other? Like, should we pretend like they're all just clean cut dudes that don't ever curse for the sake of not offending the audience, or should we tell the story how it is?
No, but that is a very revealing thing. There's a very, and it reminds me actually of things that other comedians have said, in the sense of that what your grandmother thought there and said there is indicative of a widespread view in humanity, and is a very important moral thing to address, because it's not just this country but everywhere. Is what we notice is not the bad thing. I don't know if it's a cognitive dissonance thing in our psychology, but it's your grandmother at the end of the movie didn't turn to you. She turned to you and said, I wish that was a good movie, but I wish they didn't cuss so much. But she didn't turn to you and say, that was a good movie. I wish they didn't murder so much.
Exactly. God, you got it. You've nailed it right on the head.
Where's the priority? Where's the priority of our minds and our society that words trump violence? And that like but they don't technically. We are just taught to, we can't do anything about this. Let's do something. It's like a superficial solution that we're all programmed to kind of like go for, because we can win that. We can tell them, hey, don't cuss in the movie. Can't tell him to not cut his ear off. I mean, come on. But we can tell him not to cuss.
True. It's 100% the point that
and again, I love violent movies. I'm not making an argument for violent movie, but I'm saying it reflects the world that we would be concerned with what, say, for instance, any country's soldiers say on the battlefield. Like if they're saying, oh, this is terrible. He was killing a guy in the Middle East, but while he did it, he said something, an offensive statement about the Middle East person that he was killing. And now that is wrong for someone to be bigoted, and that is dumb of them to be bigoted against people in the Middle East, but it's much more wrong for them to kill that person. Well, so it's the priorities of information. Like, how are you, you understand what I mean? Like we would prioritize, because we would never argue as a country, that we can't stop this war, but we can stop the mean way that we're murdering people. I know
the uniquely modern thing that we see in the American military is this expectation of your warriors to be civilized when they come home.
Right.
So, I mean, talk to any Marine you've ever met, talk to any soldier you've ever met, any airman, any sailor. I know they don't like to be called seamen, but there's this huge push in the military currently because of recruiting, really, to be very PC. Right. Like we don't curse in the work environment and all that kind of thing.
Right.
And they teach you that when you go through like basic and through tech school, it stays the same way.
Yeah. Cause you're supposed to look legitimate. You're supposed to look like you're the good guy, even when you're doing very bad things. And that's part of the propaganda of every country's military for a long time.
When you get to the operational side of things, suddenly that all goes away because you're going to meet someone who's seen combat and they're not going to act that way at all. They're going to be like, no, this is serious fucking business. And they will look you in the eye and be like, no, motherfucker, we're not playing that game. You don't get to be a little pussy anymore. And we're going out there and this is going to be real. And usually that doesn't come from, like, I don't think I've never met anyone who was even like, what's that fucking dumbass American Sniper, like that kind of shit.
Right.
Super propagandized stuff.
Right.
I can't think or say that I've ever met any person in the military who was overtly proud of the lives that they'd taken or participated in the, destruction.
Right. Right.
At all. They're just like, they're so in and they're so dependent on it that it's like, this is the situation we're in and we have to protect ourselves. And
right. They felt they had to do it at the time. That's one of the biggest arguments that is made. And both sides make that argument of every war that's ever been fought, that they had to do it because the other guy was trying to do it. But yeah, again, and that's where you get up the chains of like command of who's making the decisions and forcing the soldiers on both sides to do the fighting. And you go, hey, these leaders shouldn't be allowed to force these people to fight, to put these people in the situation where they have, but that's a whole nother thing. But yeah, I get what you're saying.
That's what Ozzy was singing about in War Pigs.
Yeah, awesome old references. Yeah.
No, it's kind of about an hour in here. I guess I'll try to make the podcast about what it's supposed to be about. We see the same thing in the video game industry now. And I've come up in the independent scene of games, very much not doing the corporate AAA side of things, because you have the same exact problem where all of the major, huge, successful AAA $1 million products, just like in the movie industry or in the comedy or in any entertainment industry there's this need to please the masses. And what are the most prevalent examples of this is like games about killing people, like war simulation,
right.
Call of Duty. Fortnite is more about building than really about combat, but regardless, like we've made it. And this is as a person who loves first person shooters and violence in video games, I'm just saying, like, we've created this environment where it's very normal to do shit like that. Meanwhile, the independent game scene is more like about, like horror and, visual novels and these people who are legitimately just trying to express themselves through this medium.
Right.
And you get a lot of really beautiful stuff from that. But as soon as the corporate boa constrictor gets a hold of your product, it's all about money, time, people pleasing.
Yeah, and again, I'm a strong supporter of violent video games too, and movies. Yeah. Like, I think they're awesome, and I think it's good that when GTA basically became a top-selling game, it was way it probably 10 years ago. I don't know that the top-selling game was one that you could just punch prostitutes in the face or whatever, and that's something GTA. It was a stupid whatever it was, but it gave you the freedom to do all the fucked up antisocial shit that you can't do in reality in a video game, which I would argue cuts down on people doing the antisocial shit in real life, so that violent movies and violent video games are healthy for the psychology of the population. And nobody makes that argument, but
if you're the kind of person who needs to do that, I'd rather you do it in a simulated
environment. Exactly. That's exactly what simulated environments should be used for, is that sort of one of the primary purposes, at least. But yeah, I get, again, the argument I was making before is more about the reality of things, not to say that Reservoir Dogs, shouldn't have had ear cutting in it, or shouldn't have had all those shooting and killing. No, it should have had more. It's like the kind of like the way it's about our priorities in reality and how we perceive things, and how we perceive things that can't be stopped, even though they can be, but it's a higher uphill battle. So we choose lower plateaus on the hill to go, let's fix that, which is not really important at all. And oftentimes also authorities direct us towards that to kind of prevent us from focusing on the things that they don't want us to correct. So in that same sense, obscenity, not using bad words or whatever, the whole propriety kind of thing of, an upper class kind of like talking way of not talking about certain things, is the suppression of certain subject matter and conversation is a strategic tool of authorities. They don't want, that's why, you go, whatever, certain places are like, don't talk about religion or politics. It's like, the person who said that was probably deeply connected in religion and politics, and was like, yeah, we don't want you, because you get in arguments, and when you get in arguments, you threaten our power or whatever, because you might come up with some solution that replaces us or whatever. It's just like a constant, battle of ideas. But if you don't allow people to have the battle of ideas, then they can't come up with new shit. Now, there's going to be a lot of dumb bickering, but that's just part of the overall, component of that. But the thing I was referring to was that, the Reservoir Dogs should have the violence, but the real world should not have the violence. And we should be doing things in the real life. It's not just that people are upset about cussing in movies. They're upset when people cuss in person. But I'd like to see a preacher, actually church pastor, get up in church on Sunday when everybody's there and go, hey, fuckers, we got to stop all the war and the murders and everything, all this stuff. We really got to stop it right now, because you fucking idiots, you asshole jerk-face dickheads are doing, just start cussing up a storm, going like, we need to stop the real problem. And not be obsessed with other things that aren't a problem. It's not a problem to say the word dickhead. It's a problem for somebody to fucking cut off somebody's head. That's the problem.
The only issue is that the people who tend to be brave enough to do that are like your Jim Joneses of the world, right? Like, so he was doing that. He was getting up on, in front of his entire congregation and saying shit exactly like that.
I didn't know he did that. I knew he killed all his followers or whatever. Yeah, that's the cult sort of whatever. I was just making a joke about, that the priorities that we have. Because, he did both then. He cussed and he killed people. We want people who don't kill people and yet cuss. And, at least find it, if you're going to object to the behavior of a human animal, what's really the worst thing? And if you had a whole cascade, or if you had a whole gradient of what's better and what's worse, is cussing really that bad? Now, the implication from the old school days or whatever of our grandmas is that if you cussed, it meant that you had looser morals and you could stab someone in the neck at the drop of a hat because you said the word fuck or something. That you had looser control over yourself and your mind and your actions. Now, that's wrong, but I understand why they were indoctrinated into thinking that. But still, we have to piece together, okay, saying a word is not bad. And what's also very important is you have to raise people to not be offended by words. We got raised in such a Victorian uptight society that if you said the word fuck, the person you said it to would challenge you to do a duel next. Like, that's like, whoa, where's the escalation there? But that's what they were taught, that it was so disrespectful that the next step was a battle to the death. And like, why was that the case? Because, well, with very rigid social structure that was designed that way for certain purposes. And people went to duel against each other regularly for offending someone. And it's ridiculous. And we lost some of the greatest, smartest minds in history because of duels. And eventually they got rid of them socially. They disincentivized them socially.
Well, you see the same thing like in just different cultures that exist today. Like I have friends in, New Zealand and Australia, and, as the word cunt flows.
Oh yeah.
Like just like right off the tongue. And I explained to them, like, if you say that in America, you better be ready to fight someone's boyfriend. And then after you beat his ass, then you got to fight her. Like,
right.
It's such a, potentially it's just like I don't know why. Like, I can't even think of a good reason why that's such a bad word. It's just for some reason it became
over time. Certain words over time gain a certain attitude about them.
Right. And when you talk to people and just like, everything's cool but like, don't ever say like really, I'm trying to be polite about this, but like really, really ignorant, unthoughtful people will tell you when you meet them, like, I have this list of things that like, just do not approach these topics with me. And I'm like, well, why? Like, and if you say this word, I'm just gonna get it set off. So you're telling me that you've been trained and conditioned. Right.
Like a machine, like you right. Press a button and they cook, they toast the bread. Like, why are people so machine-like? Yeah. It's all, there's a lot of context, but there's also a lot of, again, if somebody, is yelling aggressively at you and walking towards you and you don't know them, then what they say might be threatening in some way. and you might want to just whatever, you steer clear or whatever. But yeah, to use these words is not the important thing, or at least they have 1/100th the importance of the actions. Particularly when I was talking about before is the violence, like the fact, the fact that we should have more movie and video game violence to prevent real violence, because human beings, we're animals, we're technically apes, and we have to get out that impulse. We have to get out the aggression. If we don't regularly get out our aggression, it comes out in other ways. And a lot of people who end up snapping or whatever and doing violent things, horrible things, or just people generally who are quick to fight or whatever, they're people who don't regularly get to express themselves, don't get to release their aggression, don't get to release all the pent up anger that they have about whatever. And then there's a variety of ways they can healthily do that, but those ways are largely suppressed by the societies they live in.
Yeah.
So
you're in Southeast Arizona, right?
Yeah.
So the guys that made Postal live here in Tucson, right? So Vince Desi, and that was like the game. Like Postal, Grand Theft Auto, Mortal Kombat, and Doom were like the games that basically they blamed Columbine on, right? Like violence, causes this thing. And I had the opportunity, which was of a lifetime, to interview both of those guys, and also I was interviewed for a documentary that's being made about them. Shout out to the Go Postal people. Shameless plug. But they are like the sweetest, nicest people in the world.
Yeah.
And when I talk to them about this, I'm like, because they were basically like unjustly indicted for causing school shootings by making video games, violent video games.
Right. They were an easy target at the time, an easy scapegoat.
Right. And their point of view is like exactly what we're both saying, really. Vince Desi, especially, like who's the creator of the game, he's like, I think that video games or anything like art, you can have violence in art. You should not do it in real life, and it should be a very clear distinction to anyone. Like, why are we even having a discussion about whether or not if you can do it in a video game means you can do it in real life? Like,
exactly.
You wouldn't just walk down the street popping caps in people. The whole story of the game is like this guy who's so frustrated by society that he ends up taking out his aggression on people,
right? And
because he's fucked up in the head.
And a very important point about that, a caveat about that, is that as a matter of physics of why they were not at all responsible for Columbine, is literally, and this is the type of information that should be obvious to everyone, but isn't, and because there's so much information, it's a clouded environment, and especially when there's a crisis or whatever, and so people just reach for whatever they're looking for, blame and whatever. Literally, the name of the fucking video game is Postal. That means it was based on the things that were already happening, where postal workers were shooting their employees. Every once in a while in America, postal workers apparently had such a shitty job that they would freak the fuck out and kill everybody there. That was before Columbine. That was happening. It had never happened at a school before Columbine, maybe. I don't know. Probably that's not even true. But the point is that nobody thought that, Postal caused Columbine. Wait a minute. The name of the game is based off of a cultural phenomenon that's already been happening for years. Yes,
you're correct. That is exactly how I feel.
So it's like, it's a strange, it's just, it's frustratingly ignorant to blame a game. You might as well have said, no, the game didn't influence people. The Columbine shooters, the postal workers did. All the postal workers who had done that. But more importantly, my favorite blame actually for that Columbine thing was what part of Michael Moore's movie Bowling for Columbine.
Yeah,
was when he said, I think it was him that said it. Just as it was an off comment or whatever in the middle of it, where he said nobody said, they said that Marilyn Manson or the video games or whatever movies contributed to the cause of this, but nobody ever said that maybe he wasn't influenced by the video games, maybe he wasn't influenced by the music or the movies. Maybe he was influenced by his dad, who worked at Lockheed Martin, and his job every day was to kill people in the Middle East.
Maybe the video games that he was playing that they cite and the music he was listening to was his outlet that kept him both of them from doing it before they did.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that too. Yeah. But I just thought it was great to be like,
yes.
Yeah, Marilyn Manson, as far as we know, didn't actually ever kill anybody. But his dad worked at a company where he regularly built bombs and rockets that contributed to the deaths of thousands of people. And so maybe they were saying maybe he was influenced by his dad.
But we see that so glorified all the time.
Right,
Like,
exactly. There's
being a member of the military is this like
right. Certain kind of killing is
pedestal.
okay. Yeah,
Right.
Certain kind of killing is glorified. Certain kind of killing is horrifying, and you should never do it. But you should do it if it profits corporate America. You should do it if it fucking it expands the empire. Then go by all means, please. And that's the normal thinking in every society. China does the same shit. North Korea does the same shit. Saudi Arabia does the same shit. Britain does the same shit. It's all Russia. It's all that we're all indoctrinated to some extent in the means of our country's expanding wealth and power.
Well, it's like it's strange because there is a shift. There's like a pre-Vietnam and post-Vietnam sort of like change in the way that our country approached warfare. We can argue about World War II, but realistically, even if the politics were wrong, like most people felt like they were doing the right thing when they shipped off to World War II.
Right.
To some extent, a lot of good came out of that war.
Oh yeah. Now again, I argue the whole thing could have been prevented years before if it hadn't been for jerks in authority in corporations and government, in all the governments of the world and in all the major corporations of the world, really could have handled things so much better to prevent that entire thing. But because they didn't, they left us in a situation again where you had two choices. We have to you have to go to war or you don't. And at that point, you clearly have to deal with the fuckhead who's trying to take over the world. But you can prevent the fuckhead who's trying to take over the world every time in history. You can prevent the fuckhead who's trying to take over the world. Yeah, you just have to not support him. We arm and support so many people, and Hitler's just another example of American companies and a number of other countries' companies contributing to his rise because it made money and it was a good business decision at the time. But you should have said, no, this guy's a bigoted dictator. Let's not support him. Let's not give him any business. But they didn't do that because there's no ethics in large scale business. And we do the same thing right now with Saudi Arabia. Who knows? What country is later going to try to fucking take over the world with some new technology they have? Who knows what the fuck? And we could have stopped it by not doing business with a country that we know is horrifically authoritarian and fucked up and bigoted or whatever, fundamentalist, that kind of thing. It's just like a whatever. It's just a sad reality of the large scale business environment and government. How they, the whole how World War I started was a fucking chain reaction of just all the countries in the world had set up this complicated system of like, if this then that. The if this then that. So when it all cascaded down and the alliance system converged swiftly to all out war, and it was like and left a lot of people going, what the fuck just happened? And maybe it was before they knew about chaotic dynamics and they didn't understand the math of it, but they should have to some extent. So it's that kind of shit. We have to be better with our forethought, surrounding that sort of shit. Which country? Well, that was
the whole alliance system was an early attempt at mutually assured destruction.
Right. But then it converged straight towards that.
Franz Ferdinand gets assassinated. I actually did a whole podcast on World War I specifically because the game in question was about being a French soldier in World War I. And
okay,
that was a whole thing, but it's a uniquely and should have been a very educating experience of like, let's make sure this doesn't. And they tried that, we had the Geneva Conventions and all that kind of shit to try to like, okay, let's not do this again. And within like 20, 30 years, we're doing it again. And ever since then, since nuclear power was the result of World War II, though we haven't seen the same thing, we're not going to have another war that is caused by essentially, like for America's point of view, in my understanding of history, our real incentive for entering that was like our economic disparity because of the Great Depression and the fall of the stock market and blah, blah, blah. And then we enter the war. Pearl Harbor, we didn't have to go to war in Germany over Pearl Harbor, but we chose to, right? Because it made sense financially for the entire country. And honestly, like, I do think that the Nazis needed to be dealt with, and I'm glad that we helped to some extent with that, maybe. But yeah, it's crazy how that is the real, like, if you study it in hindsight, it looks like that. And if you're paying attention now, you see the same thing. You're talking about the stuff with Saudi Arabia. We could say the same thing about China. And that's another thing that translates into the tech and gaming industry. So like there's all these businesses currently that are like very willing to compromise with China because of the money involved. And I'm saying, like, don't you see the result of that? Like,
right. And there's something to be said for, like, and I get why, there's an argument to be made by like countries like Saudi Arabia and China could be maybe made to acquiesce or whatever by them becoming more economically intertwined with the United States, that they would actually prevent a war by being more economically connected. But at the same time, you could have made the same argument about Germany in the past, but you couldn't, because it was all about like, well, what were you dealing to what were the business transactions that you were doing? Oh, you large scale machinery and weaponry and stuff. And like, there's something to be said for the types of business. So if you're helping China, I don't know if Google's doing it, but if Google's helping China censor their internet, then that's not good. That's not a helpful business for China. Yeah. If you're a company that's helping Saudi Arabia become more of an authoritarian dictatorship than it already is, and it's pretty close to as much as you could be, like, or you're helping prop it up as that, then it's like, what are you? You're not. That's not the type of economic interconnection that is going to prevent a future war. That's the type that could cause a problem down the line. So yes, let's be economically interconnected with these countries, but in a way that makes them more cool and less terrible.
You studied up on Waco and the Branch Davidians.
I mean, I know a little bit of stuff, but I never I never did a paper on it.
To draw it back to Postal, because I'm obsessed with that game. There's a level in it where you go visit Uncle David, and it's like a compound, a Christian compound.
That's awesome.
And the ATF are all like surrounding the place,
and
you got to fight through them and all the cultists and everything to
that
eventually
really
find your Uncle
funny.
David. Yeah, and that's the whole point to me. Like, Postal was the South Park of video games, but
you know what they should do? They should make a video game about a first-person shooter game about the video game tournament where the guy shot people.
Yeah, and that's that's kind of where I'm getting at, because so why do so many military members get out of the military and become these extremist anti-government people? And it happens all the time. If you actually watch, there's a television series on Netflix. It's not the most accurate series in the world, but it does touch on some pretty real things. And the ATF was going in this direction at the time of, like, the show starts with this guy, and I believe in Idaho, who had been, he was a former, I want to say, Ranger. And he had decided upon his departure from the military that he wanted to be a, completely independent person. He wanted to live out in the woods with him and his kids and his wife and not depend on the government and live off the grid and do that whole thing. That's cool. We live in a free country, whatever.
Yeah.
And as a result of his need to survive, he was stockpiling ammunition. And suddenly it becomes like an ATF issue. And then they go up and they actually invade his property solely on the idea that, like, well, he's stockpiling ammunition. Why is he doing that? And then they end up shooting everyone in his family, his kids and his wife, except for him.
Right.
In the attempt to seize him. And it's like this whole, fiasco. And that was the beginning of that. And then Waco happens. The ATF gets involved because I'm not going to say he was probably, most likely, from what I understand, a kid fucker, and, fuck him.
Right.
And all that. But like, he had constitutionally, he has the right to have as much fucking shit as he wants, especially in Texas, I would assume. But they see this as a threat, and he's like weird and different and living off the grid, and he's got a whole bunch of people behind him. So they're like, they see this as a threat to the government.
Yeah. Or it's an opportunity for them. It's like violent, douchey people antagonizing other violent, douchey people so that they can be violent and douchey together. It's like, it's kind of like a street fight escalation where, some people just like that shit. They just enjoy it. It's sad, but so there are people in the government at the ATF and stuff who are all itching for a fight, and there are people who are anti-government fucking whatevers that are itching for a fight, and sometimes those two people fucking come together.
The thing is that, like, the ATF in this scenario, chose to involve and invoke violence on a situation that would not have otherwise,
right.
at least it seems, called for violence at all.
Yeah. That's the kind of thing. That's how these things start. Like that one side that's itching for the violence, does it, and then now the other side's got to respond, and it just creates this chain reaction. One could argue that, I forget, that was Ruby Ridge, right? Where I forget if that happened before Waco or after.
It was before Waco.
Okay, so before that, and then like I'm sure some whatever anti-government somebody did something, maybe Unabomber, I don't know, and then that fucking the Waco thing happened, and then the Oklahoma City bombing happened. It's like this back and forth, like there's this war going on between anti-government libertarians, whatever, and the federal government authoritarians, like, but they're enjoying it, just like the stupid street fights that happen mostly in Europe, but increasingly in the United States.
Hooligans, yes.
Well, no, but not even that, but the political kind of street fights that happen between like whatever fascists and communists in different cities in Europe. It's like a regular occurrence in Greece or whatever. That they'll just go out and beat the shit out of each other, because in those countries it's more mainstream to be one of those things. So more of the jocks are in that. In this country, you don't get a lot of jocks in the right wing or left wing extremist groups. You get more nerdy guys. They're less jock type,
cerebral, thinkers.
Right. So I mean, but increasingly in Portland and Seattle, there's more of these street fights. But so I guess it's catching on. But more usually jock type people do other things than get into politics in America. And
it's a point of view that's not spoken about enough, because I mean, I know that the 80s, movie stereotype of like the jock being the bully and all that kind of thing. But in my experience, and this is granted, like later on in the 2000s really, but the jocks were more militarized. They were these guys who were taught to be warriors on the field, but to be like upstanding citizens in front of the public. That's their expectation. You make good grades and you get into college so you can be a successful sports, whatever the fuck you want to be, that kind of thing. So they're a lot more diplomatic.
Oh, okay. Then, well, I mean, I just know the old experience was definitely there, where they were the bullies and they were just the people who had the power as far as the social system was concerned in high school or whatever. And some of them were jerks, but some of them weren't. And I actually saw a couple of times through the years, a couple like of the actually smaller, seemingly less fight capable jocks. They were still on teams and stuff, but stand up for people in situations where one of the other douchey jocks was hating on a nerd or whatever, and they stood up for them when they were outmatched even. But they what they said in the moment was so cool and so like profound, and it shut down. It totally diffused the anger of the bully, and made the victim of the potential attack. They were about to get their ass kicked or something. And this person stepped in and prevented it with words. And it was just a couple of profound experiences where I remember that happened. And like, damn, that dude is not only like capable of physical whatever, but also very smart as far as human interaction is concerned.
I'm not saying that I didn't know jocks that were assholes.
Right.
But I mean, I also I grew up in Alabama. So like a football player there is not thinking about, I'm just going to play football in high school. They're like, I want to go to Alabama.
Yeah, it's a career to them. Don't fuck up the career kind of thing.
Right. So like getting in a fight in school for them was like potentially, if they get expelled,
it's over.
Going to ruin their life.
Right.
And so I'm not saying they weren't dickheads. They were just not stupid.
Right. Not as prone to violence as in the past, where
there were no biffs in my school.
Right. There
were a lot of Tim Tebow's.
Because the incentive to make a shit ton of money in the pros, which is good. That's good to incentivize people who are have the most potential to just shit on the social experience of most of the people there. Incentivize them towards better things so that they never go with their worst impulses.
Yeah, I had a lot of friends on the football team because all
I had a few.
They were all pot smokers.
Yeah, that was one of the cool things, actually. That was one of the things, because I hated a lot of people on the football team, but I also had a few friends that were on it, and they were, because, I went to not a school where they were going to be pros, and they were, and they had many reasons to be dickheads. But a few of my friends were there, and they but one of the things that happened sometime, over the course of your 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th grade, somewhere in between 10th or 11th grade, one of the smarter, cooler people on the football team was like, if I get these people to smoke pot, they'll be a lot cooler. And so they slowly introduced it, and like some of the most jerkish asshole dudes started smoking pot, and they were way cooler. They were way less.
I suddenly found myself in this situation as like this small like guy who was very open to just telling people what I thought. Like, you really won't hit me right now because my friends are all with me.
Right.
It's a really tribal, fucked up way to look at the world. But like, I was 18, 17.
Yeah, that's how, yeah.
Yeah. And I was just like, yeah, go ahead, hit me, see what happens. Like, this is not going to turn out well for you. Which is bad. I don't I don't look at that time fondly, but
no, but it's one of those things. Well, that's part of growing up or whatever is experience. I only found out about that, like after the fact. I was thinking about, oh yeah, when the one dude like later, I think it must have been like first year of college or something. And he was telling me, these guys are all smoking pot now, and I was like, what? He's like, yeah, a couple of us started getting them into it a couple of years ago. And I was like, that's so fucking cool. Like, you mean that, and it made people much more chill. And some of them had been, prone to the horrible, whatever, aggressive impulses. But that's just, yeah. So point is there's better ways to handle those things. And yeah, marijuana is one of those ways.
So you at one point had the Chris Heist podcast, right?
Or something. I didn't even call it anything. It was just like, somebody pressured me into doing it. I didn't want to do it, and somebody was like, "You have to do it." And it was years and years ago, and so I did 10 episodes of them, and it was just me interviewing other comics that I knew a little bit around town in LA, and but it wasn't like, I've thought about trying to do a podcast recently where it's just me or something, and I would just talk about shit, but I have to get the format right before I think it's good enough. I tried something that I never released about a year ago, and it's
a lot of work.
Yeah, but I don't want it to be. A podcast should just be something you just turn it on and there it is. You just do it and talk for an hour and that's it, or whatever.
But Bill Burr's got a good method there where it's just him ranting, and that's good because that's what he's good at. And
only he can do that. And but there's some other people. There's only a few podcasts that like comedian ones that are like really funny. And I don't want to be that kind of podcast. I'm not that mine would be more just like, it would just be a fucking live stream. But really, a podcast sadly is a means for comics. A podcast is a means for an audience to, that you have a lock, because a stand-up. Yeah, exactly. A stand-up special happens every year or 6 years. And you can't keep your fans engaged. They used to do it with an email list or something. But hey, I'm coming to your town kind of thing, which I still think I should have, which I don't have any.
You technically do. If you go on your website, you do have the contact thing, but you're so fucking cerebral about it. You're like, just email me the state what you're.
Exactly. Exactly. It's way too, convoluted.
Yeah.
But yeah. And mainly for the past 10 years, people abandoned that model to use just Twitter and Instagram. That everybody who's a follower of theirs on Twitter and Instagram, you just post what your show was, and people who were in that area would go to it or whatever. So it became like a substitute for that. But I don't really do anything on Twitter or Instagram either. I have an Instagram that I just will post the newest stand-up album cover when I come out with one every once in a while. But yeah, the podcast really, for fans of anything, common, frequent engagement, as they say in the social media world, is important to keep the stickiness or whatever. It's a marketing douche sort of thing or whatever. But yeah, I suck at the business side of this stuff. So I have 11 stand-up albums out that are all free, can be downloaded for free or listened to on my YouTube page. But they're all, I never tried to sell anything, never tried to get any whatever. I never did any of the business side. Never had a manager and none of that stuff. So I don't know what the fuck. And because I ethically object to some of that stuff. So it's like, it's hard for me to even promote my own shows.
Self-sabotage.
Right. Yeah. In a sense, but it's like also sort of holding to this stupid, ethical something. It's just it's like an impulse or a feeling. I don't really have don't really object to telling people about a show you're doing. You know, I don't have to do it in an ironic way. I can just be like, yeah, hey, if you like what I do, I'll be here. And if 20 of you showed up, that'd be really cool. You know, and that's that kind of thing. It's just the business side of anything is just something that I've been so repelled by that even my own stand up is just not. So yeah, but it should be. I forget what your original comment or whatever it was.
I was just going to ask you about what your experience doing the podcast was, but
it wasn't that. Like again, it was something like I was only doing it because another comic literally told me, you better do this or I'm going to fuck with you, like hard. And I was like, all right. and then eventually, I did a few of them and I was like, this is not, if I ever wanted to do this sort of thing, this is not the way I want to do. First of all my favorite comedians and what I consider to be the best comedians never had a podcast. Don't need a podcast. I love Bill Burr. I love Rogan. I think they're amazing comics. Stanhope has a fucking podcast. He's obviously one of the best of all time.
Right.
But they're the three exceptions. Now Dave Chappelle has a podcast, but he didn't for a long time. It's really.
I'd say it's not something you should do because it's a trend.
Oh yeah, exactly. But I think they're all doing it now for the reason that it builds an audience. Stanhope is a very obscure comedian, and I don't know the numbers of what his audience was before and after 6 or 7 years ago when he started his podcast, but it definitely, like you said before, it helps keep people engaged and connected to the whatever artist, whatever it is, musician, a comedian, whatever. Then they can easily have people come out to shows or buy the new thing that they fucking put out or whatever. It's a glorified email list. It's still this. It serves the same function, but with more bells and whistles. But it keeps.
I think Stanhope is an interesting case because, like what we were talking about earlier, with like different comedians that sort of subvert their way into the business and then change or whatever, he's done exactly what he does the entire time. I've listened to everything that man's ever put out.
Oh yeah.
When I was a teenager, I was like, this guy is speaking the God's honest truth.
Yeah.
That's really how I felt. And I've been to Bisbee many, many, many times since I moved to Arizona. I've never bumped into him. I would love to one day.
Here he goes to Tucson occasionally to do sets too. But he's a great comic. But and he, even though he has always done what he does, early on he did do club type comedy to a sufficient extent to be able to be booked by them.
Yeah,
like he did. He did a lot of, and he would make fun of it, kind of like while he was doing it or whatever. But he would still, which I guess Hicks used to do sort of too. If a certain bit wasn't working, they'd be like, "Oh, I'm going to do stupid shit because that's what you like then," or whatever.
I mean, I'm never going to try to talk you out of doing, of your ethics or who you are, but I do find it like difficult to understand why you wouldn't play the game so that you can, because your mission ultimately is to get your message out, like get to the point where you can. And if that takes a little bit of like sucking it up, then,
I guess it takes, but I don't know that's I just do what I do and I put it out independently. And I do have bits that occasionally rag on what it is that I do or whatever, and which goes over better, or, I'll start talking about fucking, not airline food, but that type of thing or whatever. And some of my earlier albums had an occasional bit that was like kind of that sort of thing to interrupt the other, in a similar vein, I guess, of, you don't like this, here's what you like kind of thing, but never to any quantity where I would get booked by a fucking club, a major club or whatever. They would just,
right,
because I would upset the audience, too much of every audience, especially if it was, in Los Angeles, there's tons, the major clubs are all tourist havens. You have to be palatable to people from Kentucky and Alabama and Florida and New York and California, all in one. You have to be mainstream, like the beam of focus has to be narrow enough that it does not upset any one particular group or just talks about inane shit. So I get it, and I get why people would say that sort of thing, but I always like just doing what I do, and if people eventually find it, that's cool. And if they don't, I mean, that's what I've been already doing for many, many years. I've got 11. They're all DIY as fuck. Some of them are EPs or whatever, but 11 stand-up albums, and it's just like most people. It's not the kind of stuff they would like, but some people like it, and that's okay. And eventually, if I could get the logistics and the business side of things, more importantly, would just be to figure out how to route a fucking tour through places where I can't really get booked. So I gotta just kind of just figure out a place, somebody's house or somebody's fucking dive bar or whatever, where I can just do a bunch of shows. But to configure them all, it's it's that kind of thing where, even whatever, charging a $5 ticket price at a bar, I don't know. I'm just so terrible with the fucking business side of shit but I'm okay with that. If I've put out so much stand-up material already that, of course, almost no one has ever listened to, but that's okay. It's just, and I'm working on a new one now, and I'm trying to edit that together, and just, it's just part of the whatever. Usually, especially comics that are of that ilk or whatever would have some manager who didn't care about making a lot of money, but could make a little bit of money booking shows around the country or whatever for them, and they could go on tour for half the year and then chill and write the other half of the year, but I don't know, it's not, my process has just been to just keep writing and keep making new stuff and releasing a lot of new stand-up, every couple months or something. I put out another EP or album, and just but to be able to, like, that's why I never wanted to like you were saying, like, get to the point where I was play the game a little bit, is because I have so much material that I want to work on that I think is important to me or whatever, or what I think or whatever, that I just concentrate on that. Like to concentrate on the other stuff is just distracting from what I'm trying to, more so than the ethical objection or any ethical objection. I would have to doing dick jokes or whatever, which I occasionally have versions of that mixed in with philosophical shit. It distracts from the time that I could spend doing, the shit that I really want to do. Like this most recent album that I'm trying to put together is just a fucked up thing that's all about this one idea. And I'm trying to just fucking get it organized right and edit it together like all the other albums. And, maybe eventually somebody will want to do a video or whatever. I could ask a couple people I know in LA that might do it or whatever. But then they charge money too and stuff. And
the crazy guy Chris who hangs out at the open mics, he's like doing fucking Shakespeare and shit on stage. That guy? I don't
think so. I'm not on Live in Tucson, so I've only been to a couple of mics there.
So he's an actor, really, and he's voice acting in a game that I'm producing, which is why we're friends. And I actually went to the show that I met you at because of him.
Oh, hell yeah!
But he is a pretty competent filmmaker. Like I'm pretty sure he could shoot a special if he had to, even if it were like super guerrilla style. Like he could do it, and I'm sure he would appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, I love super guerrilla style, and as long as the camera works and it can pick up audio well enough that it's not indiscernible.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that could be arranged. I mean, I'm not like trying to make a deal for him live.
Right. Well, yeah, definitely something to talk about after. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah. Do that kind of stuff. Like because currently what you have out, which I like all your albums that I've listened to. I listened to Argument of Disaster and Advances in Self-Government, and a lot of your like kind of just videos. Like you
hell yeah,
just solo shit.
Thanks, man.
But it's all like your cell phone or whatever sitting on the side of the stage capturing you from a strange angle or whatever. But
right, exactly. Or the H4n or whatever thing for audio.
Oh yeah, you do have a Zoom H4. I have literally one right here. I noticed that when you stepped on stage, you sat down a Zoom. Yeah, and I was like, I have the exact same recorder. This guy, that's so funny.
Yeah, and that's because somebody told me, because I had been using a GoPro, and somebody who's a good comic who's a filmmaker also in Los Angeles was like, he listened to one of my albums just out of nowhere, because almost nobody actually does. But I'm glad. Thank you for doing that. But like this one dude, I didn't tell him to. He was just like, "Hey, I listened to your album the other day, and I liked it, but the audio quality needs to be better." And I was like, "Yeah, I've been using a GoPro." He's like, "Yeah, you should use get the fucking H4n. I was like, all
I
right.
bought the H4n when I first got into podcasting when I was like 19 years old.
Hell yeah.
but-
Not to do an advertisement for them or anything, but like,
No, fuck Zoom.
just
They
have-
suck.
but just have good audio. So yeah, if this guy can do video and audio that sounds and looks okay, and is down to do some experimental crazy shit with a comic that's trying to record some crazy shit, and yeah, we can find a fucking dive bar in Tucson that'll let us do that. Which I know of a couple places that might. That would be pretty cool. So yeah, we could talk about that afterwards. But yeah, it's that kind of the whatever, the logistics of making certain things happen. The only reason I can so easily put out the albums that I do is I figured out a long time ago just how to just DIY as fuck, record almost everything I do, and then put it together. Just because I have no other options. Because most places, like I said, probably a third, if not a quarter, of all the venues I've ever performed at would not let me perform there after a certain point. And not to say that half of the rest of them probably didn't like what I was doing, but they tolerated it, only because of who was running the show, who was tolerant of it, because they were a comic who appreciated fucked up comedy. So they were, there've been a couple of people who stood up for everyone's freedom to experiment on stage. Through the years, not just me, but the people who defended everyone's freedom to do that, because they realize that's part of where interesting shit can come from. A lot of, if you suppress even mentally, get people to self-censor and stuff like that, it ruins the fucking comedy. Even the people who, some people are going to be bad at an open mic anyway, because there's a lot of new people and a lot of experienced people trying out new shit. But if you suppress their freedom, they're going to be even worse, even though it may seem better to the slower people in the audience. There might be the more, ups, whatever, the high society types or whatever, people who want things to be clean and totally not subversive at all. They might enjoy it more, but it's really not nearly as good. So even
I think it's all about marketing, man.
I mean,
literally.
There's some of that, but yeah, on the album I had the other thing about people allowing horrible shit to go on stage, that they have to be, that we need people to tell businesses. Right. I think that was on Argument of Disaster, but it was we need to incentivize businesses to do that, to allow that instead of the opposite. Because right now, almost every business, almost every bar, and especially comedy clubs, but almost every bar too, has a strong incentive to disallow the freedom to experiment on stage because of their fear that they will lose customers. So we have to reverse it.
They literally just have to change their marketing. Like it's a very simple trick that anyone can do. Is just like, hey, tonight, you want to see the fucking craziest shit you ever seen in your life? Be at our bar.
Right. Yeah, the no complainers night or whatever. Yeah,
because there's a reason why bars in Mexico can have
donkey sex, whatever. Yeah, exactly.
As long as you advertise it, that's what you're doing. Those people will show up.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, and Mexico's a pretty Catholic country, but there's not people protesting out front of the donkey fucking night. So I mean, exactly. They get away with it. That's cool. That's actually See, that's true. But that's the problem, is apparently a lot of bar owners don't think there's any business in it. They don't think it's good for them economically.
There's so much business in donkey fucking dude.
Well, no, but I mean just in fucked up stand up. But yeah, there's definitely donkey fucking, but that's illegal here. But fucked up crazy shit stand up shouldn't be illegal, and should be. I'm just saying that there's apparently, from what I've seen and experienced, just seeing the different scenes around this country, there's a strong incentive for businesses to sometimes tout themselves as having this is our offensive comedy show, but it's totally not when it's booked like that. Oh, yeah. That's another problem with it. If you book it as
the other night at the movie theater, they said we're having our dirty show, soon or whatever.
I'm okay, but there was no donkey fucking. It's difficult to do. That's the problem too, is of advertising it as that. Is it tends to not be that when it's advertised as that, instead of just like how advertising of freedom, like it's just freedom. You can just say whatever, anything. It might be the tamest shit in the world, It's not going to be all offensive shit, but all of the worst offensive shit could be there, but it also could be the tamest shit in the world. It's Jeff Dunham and Ray Romano and Stanhope and the corpse of Lenny Bruce, whatever. It's fucking everything. Just you can do whatever. You could do shopping mall bullshit, and you could do, corpse fucking jokes, whatever. It's just a so and that might avoid the tendency for those shows that are marketed as being offensive or subversive or obscene coming off as really tame by not.
You just need to say it and mean it like one or two times, and then people will get the message.
Right, or just kind of known, and the like word of mouth advertise it. Don't like put it on a sign anywhere, but like, hey, we're going to do this crazy shit here every week. The owner's cool with it. But that's the thing. That's still the hardest thing, I think, is getting the owner to be cool with it. Because anytime that sort of shit happens, there's always a group of douches that will fucking call in or walk in and go like, no, if you do this, blah, 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 we're going to fucking, you're going to lose business. And so
it's like an argument to me. You and I both kind of came from like a kind of a punk rock, heavy metal background where it's like, club owners knew if you invited people to a heavy metal show that there was going to be a mosh pit and people were probably going to get hurt, and they were willing to do business.
Yeah, and
they're also going to buy drinks. Like
one of my claims to fame, which is not a claim to fame, but is that of one of the venues I was banned from performing at, and it's only because somebody else bought it and was running it. But one of the venues that I was banned from is a venue that Anal Cunt played at.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, they could play there, but I was banned from. All right. And that's just, and again, that was only because the previous owner was cooler than the subsequent owner. But it was still, this dude who bought the place was supposedly punk rock. He was supposedly a comic too. But he was like, yeah, he was one of there's been a few through the years, but he was the first person to be like, look, man, it's nothing personal. Your material's just bad for business.
I would literally like start doing comedy shows in people's backyards if that were the case. Like I would go full on like Black Flag with it.
Yeah, I should. If I don't know of anybody doing that anymore. I assume they are, but like, yeah,
I would much sooner show up to a backyard comedy show.
Exactly.
Have to go fucking downtown too.
In Los Angeles, I guess they do it, but they never booked me on this. Those were more like trying to be famous. They were trying to, there were agents in the crowd kind of thing. They were trying to get on TV shows and shit like that. So the Los Angeles backyard shows were really like, fashion show type upscale events. But I did do a couple in Florida over the years that were, just cool inside, outside, whatever. And yeah, but it wasn't as, or at least I'm not connected in the network of even the comics that do that sort of shit. I know a couple of the whatever more underground comics that would be in a certain class. They don't do the same type of stuff that I do, but it's we could be on the same show and it would be like people would be like, I get why they're on the same show.
Yeah,
that kind of So, but I also live like 1,200 miles from them, so it's like it's not easy to configure a house show with that logistically. But yeah, it's something that should definitely happen more frequently. But I also like that it, there's something to be said for the greatness of underground shows and stuff like that. But I also feel like always pushing into the mall, so to speak, always pushing into into the business, into the bar. I don't want Black Flag to just be in a fucking basement. I don't want the comics like fucking Mortzall and Dick Gregory to only be heard of by these bohemians in fucking San Francisco. I want them to be on fucking Monday Night Football, doing a bit during a halftime show, subversive as fuck bit, not like some bullshit. Like I always felt the need to, cause I coming up doing stand up or whatever. And, was doing shows around Florida and there were plenty of places where it was coffee shops filled with anarchists or whatever. And they were like, yeah, but I'm not a rah-rah to the crowd kind of guy. I don't need to fucking tell these people this shit. They know it already. So I would be like talking to, I would always go other places, and I was happy when somebody would book me. It was very rare. But there was this one dude who was also in the military. He was very cool, still loved freedom, like actual freedom, wasn't authoritarian. And one time he ran a show in outside of Tampa somewhere, and he booked me at this fucking bowling alley, in this conference room of a bowling alley. It was a very mainstream show. And more than that, he was military guy. He had many audience members who would come who were old brass, old, higher level lieutenants, fucking colonels, whatever, who were now older or whatever. So he booked me this show, and there's this back room, conference room at this place, dark night, and there's it's filled with, there's about 10 or 15 comics that are younger in the back that know me, and then there's a couple of younger people in the audience, but almost all 50s, 60s, 70s military brass. He booked me because he knew what I did. So he was like, I want them to see you.
Yes.
And he was like, because he's like, I don't even agree with, half the shit you say, but I want them to know. I want them to know that this is okay. And he was like, because, whatever. He just believed in freedom. And he was cool about that shit. And I was like, all right. So I did the show, and they fucking hated it a lot, and because this is a mostly elderly audience and I'm just criticizing America the whole fucking time. And they're like, and the comics in the back are fucking laughing their asses off. And the younger people to some extent too, but they're just loving the fact that this is happening. And so afterwards, the dude gets up on stage because he's the host of the show or whatever. And he says, I forget how he phrased it, but he basically said something to the effect of, that was criticized, blah, blah, blah. He's usually banned from performing at places, and they applauded. And he stopped him. He was like, no, that's why I wanted him to do this here, is because this is America, and we should be open to hearing all sorts of crazy shit. Even if it's shit that we disagree with, we have to be open to hearing this criticism of this, whatever. It's part of things. We're not an authoritarian state like Saudi Arabia or North Korea or whatever. We can take it. We can handle it. We can talk about these things. We can hear about these things. But it was funny because he had to stop them from cheering that I was usually banned at places, and loud, that was the biggest, and I got to find that tape because I still have that on tape somewhere.
My brother-in-law, this was back in 2014, 2015, something like that. He was a guardsman, and Army guard, and he had gone to, he had enlisted in the guard August of 2001. And so he's in boot camp when 9/11 happens, and then they tell him everyone here is going to Iraq, basically. Which
they told him that before 2003.
Oh yeah. You're just so y'all all know, we're all going to Iraq, kind of thing. And what was so great about it was that up until that point, if we know our American history of the last 20 or so years, that people in the National Guard did not expect to fight in foreign wars ever, right? That was not a thing.
Yeah, one of the perks of the Guard.
That was when they knew, this is changing very rapidly. So he ends up in 2003 in Iraq and does the whole thing. And later, I ended up in the Presidio of Monterey, which is the linguist school for all military members. And I was talking to one of my teachers, whose name was Haider, who's an Iraqi guy, because I was learning Arabic. And he is telling me his story of how, he basically was, caught in the shit, and he joined the American forces as a translator and all that kind of thing. And he was like, I was, grouped up with a bunch of, military police to go around and basically be the guy who's talk to sheiks and shit to say hey, we're not the enemy. We're here to help, that kind of thing. And I realized at some point that the two of them knew each other, because they literally served at the same exact time in the same exact kind of unit. And I talked to both of them. And I'm like, oh my God, you guys are friends. But the point I'm trying to make here is that later when I'm sitting down with my brother-in-law, I'm like, so what was that whole thing like? And this is, like I said, that time period, 2015-ish, when the super aggressive left PC, like you must conform to our way of speech kind of thing happened. And I was asking him how he felt about that. And he said, you know what? Like, I literally fought for those people's freedom to disagree with my beliefs. And I'm okay with that. Like, I want them to be able to express what they say, even though it's not where I come from.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought that was beautiful. But it sucks that you're in front of this group of people who like, because I think that honestly, a lot of ex-military guys would definitely, people who I know would vibe with what you're saying 100%. Not to the extreme of like saying like, you know, fuck them all or they're all idiots. But
right.
Like where they got, you know, you join when you're like a kid.
Exactly.
And then you get out when you're an adult and you understand things a lot more and you've seen it yourself.
Right. That's why they pick people up when they're kids in our ROTC or junior ROTC or whatever. 18 is the sign up official. You know, if 25 was the official sign up age that you had to wait until, less people would sign up.
That's 100% true to most people. You can join up to you're like 32 or something like that.
Oh yeah. But if you couldn't join up until you were 25, because that's when the amygdala forms fully in a human being, where they can make life and death decision making much more credibly. You know, that's an increasing argument that 25 is the actual age for a lot of things. That based on just that's when we can make risk assessment competently. Apparently, I don't know. That's, you know, but yeah, I get what you're saying. Yeah, it's one of those things where some people who are very freedom loving, whatever the words are for that. You know, even in the military or whatever, and yeah, some of them got in over their head when they were 18 and they didn't know the game, and then by the time they know the game, they're stuck in it, and then they later get out and they're like, yeah, that was fucked up, whatever. And yeah, so it's all
they also, those same people also appreciate the skills that they learn, because that's exactly what makes them a prime candidate for being independent and running their own business and running.
Oh, that's true. They learn a lot of stuff. You definitely learn like a lot of self-reliance type things. It's unfortunate that we don't have a way to inculcate self-reliance without also having to kill people in the process. It's like, why do those? Maybe that's why those go together so much with the Unabomber cabin kind of guy. Is just hey, murder comes with self-reliance. It's just part of it. It's just.
I mean, you what if you're going to be totally independent? You have to be prepared to defend yourself.
That's true. That's true. That's true. That is true. And yeah, and I mean, the isolation. But I was just making a joke or whatever. But it's definitely one of those things where, yeah, the way of the world is such that, yeah, every country still has this giant bureaucratic military establishment to whatever degree. Even fucking Finland has a military, and
they have to.
Yeah,
they're conscripted into their military.
Right. Yeah, many are still. They're still a draft in most countries. It's crazy. But yeah, my point is that even countries where you would think like even fucking Monaco probably has a military.
The Finnish, when I talked to you, and I've actually coincidentally had a lot of Finnish people on the show because they're intrinsically involved in Quake, which is one of my favorite video games.
Awesome. That's great.
Yeah. But they, I think that most of them feel a responsibility because of their proximity to Russia, and like they still remember what happened in World War II.
Right. They still have there's huge whatever. They rely on NATO or whatever for the whole thing is yeah. So Finland's an obscure, probably not the best example of a country. Monaco's better as a principality or whatever.
Yeah.
But then again, that's just full of giant rich people. So they totally would need a military to protect all their fucking money there. So yeah, it's just basically rich people in every country need a military to protect their money. And to try to take it from other countries, and they have to protect it from the other countries trying to take it from them. It's just like basically, yeah. It's it's a fucked up world. But it might improve, but it might not. Now, my argument in my recent material is that it's, like it may have an upward trajectory, and like sometimes markets do over the long run, but in the short run, sometimes there's a sell-off.
So this is the last real thing I wanted to touch into, and then I'll let you get along with your day, and we'll do this again sometime later.
Hell yeah, thanks, man.
What do you think of, and I know that you're kind of an example of this, but the way that our art conveys these issues of, an overarching governmental, maybe conspiracy or just like trend. Usually I would argue that what we call conspiracies are really trends that happen organically and don't happen because there's one guy with a cigar, in a smoky room somewhere, like the Bill Hicks joke. Like,
right.
It's not this directed.
Right. The Carlin actually had a great point, I think, on Mars show in like 2005 or something. Carlin said it's a convergence of interests.
Yes.
It's not. Yes. It's much less often a conspiracy, much more often a convergence of interest that the people don't even realize. They're just, everybody's going for their same self-interest, and all these interests happen to converge in the same direction. And so when you have all these powerful people moving in the same direction, it looks like it's coordinated, but it's just them all going swimming towards the food or whatever.
Yeah. So, I mean, I can point to a million examples in film, in comedy and games and TV shows, whatever. Like, speaking strictly game wise, like a Deus Ex, Half-Life, even Doom to a certain extent. Like these stories. Wolfenstein is a great example as well. Yeah, and coincidentally, Doom and Wolfenstein made by the same people.
Yeah, and that was one of the first ones I remember. Right before, like, 'cause I was telling you, I have a lot of friends back in the day who played Doom and Duke Nukem and fucking. But they also had Wolfenstein was the fucking had one of my favorite weapons of any one of the games, the first person shooter game, was like God mode, we called it. I don't know why, but you remember where you would just hold up like your left hand a little bit in front of you, and there was like this glowing ball, and it would go like oh or something like that, and people would just be killed all around you when you did that. There was some
that later became the BFG, or the big fucking gun, in Doom. But yeah.
Okay. So you know the feature I'm talking about, or whatever.
Yes.
Okay.
So all of our artwork tells the same story you're telling, right? Like the government is not serving its people at least in these, we'll use the analogy, like in these fantasy worlds that are allegedly art is reflective of society and all that kind of thing. We keep telling the story and no one seems to be getting the fucking message. And I'm curious, like, does that resonate with you? Does that have any, like, did that, maybe your experiences with those, with that art stuff, did that have an impact on your thought process, and what can it
like the fact that the art never led to any productive outcome?
Yes.
Right. That's a perception, but I would disagree to a certain extent in that I would say that but I would say that I would agree also. I would say it kind of goes back to like something close to what I was saying originally when we started talking. It was like the way that reality works, we're often constrained. There's limitations both spatially and temporally, and we have to deal with the situations that we have with what we have at the time, but then we have to constantly update that thing. So similarly, art, is not able to ever seal the deal. Hey, we fixed this entirely. But by constantly poking at the authority and constantly poking at the people, it progressively inches towards better outcomes, when done well. And when it's not done at all, or when it's not done well as a society, the society tends to degrade. But, there's not a lot of good stand-up comedy in Saudi Arabia. Not a lot of good video games, I would think, or movies or shows or anything. It's all just the regime is awesome. The regime is awesome. That's the whole programming. So same with North Korea. You're not getting like, you should see this subversive comic in North Korea. It just doesn't exist. So like the more free a society is, despite it seeming ineffectual, that it seems like it's not having any effect, I could argue that it's having a subtle effect that if it wasn't there, the society would slide down even further. So that it's important, at least as a bulwark or whatever the fuck, a blockade of some sort of fucking thing in the way, some obstacle in the way of authoritarian institutions, whether they be government or corporations or religions, whatever. It's this thing that, again, to the degree that it's done well, is the degree to which it prevents abuse of power in a society. So it's not that it's pointless, it's that we should constantly be pushing for the quality, what I would consider the quality of, like the freedom of it, to allow the quality to emerge from that freedom, and to constantly be, allowing people to build better and better stuff, and crazier shit. And have the consumers or whatever, the listeners, be able to appreciate and understand more and more complicated shit, more and more complex. The complexity of things is going to increase in a variety of things. It's in this world, so we have to really expand our ability to cope with and manage those things. And whether it's stand-up or music or books or fucking painting, whatever the fuck, art or whatever's considered artistic or whatever, that plays that role, pushing, trying to change things. And it could change things faster. And I would argue that it should. Like, I'm not saying it's doing a great job, but it's keeping pace so that free societies are not totally sliding into oblivion, but it's not, so instead of is it working or is it not working, it's working to a certain degree and could be working a lot better if we got more aware of the fountain of its, really good emergent properties that can happen if we actually supply, the freedom in our society, culturally, in these institutions, not just in underground house shows, although they're great. If it ain't happening in random bars, if it ain't happening in upscale bars, if it isn't happening in comedy clubs, it's being suppressed, and your society at that level is being a little North Korea-ish. So it's, to the degree that we can push the boundary of, similarly to how GTA is fucking mainstream video game, Stanhope should be mainstream American stand-up. But he's far from it. But he should be. But it's just the only thing holding him back is that the outlets are not putting him there. He had one special on Netflix years and years ago, but most of his shit.
He actually had a few, but most of them got taken down.
Oh, okay. I just know that the one was up there.
Your Hall Push was up.
Yeah.
And I think it's still up. But there was a few of where he was.
But they took the rest down.
In Oslo.
Yeah,
that one was great.
Oh yeah, they're all great. They should all be up there. But maybe that's Netflix's stupid thing where it only pays for rights for certain periods of time, and then it loses most of the movies that it ever has instead of keeping them there forever, which is what every streaming service should strive to do. I don't know why they would ever cut things from their thing, but also it's just not there. It's just not readily available. I mean, it is on YouTube, and it is, but there are things like, my point is that really fucked up stand-up should be mainstream, and certain people are trying to push that back into the mainstream, but there's a limit. There's always a limit. And what I'm saying is we need to push the limits way, way further as far as we possibly can. Because the world needs to be criticized. And one of the main ways that it's effectively criticized is through stand-up. Of course, again, 99% of stand-up comics do not do that at all. But in order, apparently, for the 1% who do or whatever, it takes, the 99% of the mainstream comics talking about shoelaces and fucking microwaves or whatever. That's still, I guess, an economic viability sort of thing. They need to be there to provide the ticket sales so that occasionally a crazy fucker can come through and do stand up. If Ray Romano isn't at the Improv, if there's not one of him every week or whatever, then maybe there can't be a different more fucked up. I mean, the fucked up comics I like wouldn't even. Yeah, they're some of the best in the world, but they're from other countries. They would never be booked here. It's just fucked up. But yeah, so I would. We could do a lot better. Just a hell of a tangent there, but it's generally, art could. It is having some effect to the degree that it's allowed to, and if it wasn't there, the society would deteriorate ever faster. So I would argue, it's not a yes or no thing. It's not it's having an effect or it's not. It's just we have to, as greatly as we can, magnify the effect that it can have by giving it the freedom to come up with the crazy shit that might make the arguments that no one else is making, that, finds a solution to something or just makes people laugh, whatever.
I agree. It's like same thing in the music business, right? Like, so if not for Metallica, I may never have found Megadeth, and for a more modern perspective would be like, if not for someone like Avenged Sevenfold, there's a lot of kids, those are like gateway bands, if that makes sense.
Right.
Like,
Exactly.
Avenged Sevenfold, I don't think they ever did anything that's particularly interesting, but they're a heavy band who's very popular and they got people to listen to heavy music. And as a result of that, many of those kids ended up listening to bands who had far better and more honest method. I'm not saying anything against them. I'm sure they're great people and all, but that's a gateway into finding really important things that have a long lasting effect on your life.
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
And so if not for, honestly, if I hadn't found, Rogan and Stanhope and Carlin and stuff like that, you and I probably wouldn't be talking right now, because those are the things that got me interested in comedy.
Right. Okay. Yeah. It's that kind of thing. Yeah. That happens. It's kind of like a stylistic bridge or whatever that occurs in, like, the music example is great. Yeah. People go from, some rock radio metal band or whatever to something that's more fucked up, to something that's more fucked up, to something that's good. Like to get the really awesome, they fucking, the crazy, I don't know, the Locust or something, fucking, I don't know, just weird shit. Fucking Meshuggah and Dillinger or fucking, bridges to probably tons of other bands.
I saw Dillinger Escape Plan for I want to say my 19th birthday. My girlfriend and my friends, we drove to New Orleans for that, and they were fucking amazing, dude.
Oh yeah.
Like, what? Just to, actually, I know I said I was going to close off, but like music stuff. Like, what do you love? I saw your Kill Tony set where they like kind of pressed you on this, and you're like, all that shit.
Yeah, I mean, I like the weirdest, heaviest, craziest shit. So yeah, but it's also there's also I like some stuff I love for just the rhythmic whatever crazy polyrhythm they're doing with guitars and drums, and some stuff I love for the fucking lyrical shit too.
Yeah.
So there's as far as like heavy bands, it's fucking. I mean, Dillinger's definitely up there, but back in the day, I used to love like fucking Snapcase and Quicksand and shit like that. It's like, but Helmet, fucking great fucking band.
Oh God, I love Helmet.
Yeah,
Milk Toast on the Crow soundtrack. Oh my, what?
And their album before that, before the album that song was on, the album before it was just so amazing. I forget what in Meantime, I think was the name. It was the name of the first song. I think it was also the name. I think it was also the name of the album. And it's a legendary hardcore band doing. Yeah, changing the game. The Refused is another one. The Refused is another band that is just amazing. I mean, I like weirder shit. Mr. Bungle, that type of shit. Fucking Secret Chiefs 3 is basically.
Dude, you are like one of 3 people now that I know who are like a fan of Secret Chiefs. I literally recommended them to a friend like not 2 days ago. I was like, you would like this.
Hell yeah, because they're weird as fuck, good shit. And that's it. And I've been playing in bands for many years. I'm even in technically a band that's weird shit like that was heavily influenced. Like I'm into it, but the guy who was in that band with is like the most obsessed person with every member of Bungle and Secret Chiefs. It's just so yeah, we did that shit for so many years. So yeah, there's obscure bands even from them though. Fucking, I don't think Stratosphere is still around anymore, but like they had Orange Tulip Conspiracy was some thing that did, but just weird fucking music that's really heavy at times, but also just really complicated and just like, why the fuck does this exist kind of thing. It's so out there.
Bring the conversation back to you again, and I hate to keep harping on this, but like Mr. Bungle, right? Patton, who is my favorite vocalist who's ever existed.
Yep.
Like, does Faith No More? They're doing like these Commodore covers, like Easy Like Sunday Morning, so that they can then turn around and do some wild shit like Motherfucker,
right?
like whatever.
Right. And that was a record label decision, I'm sure, or at least an offer. Hey, why don't you do a cover? That's something they told bands a long time ago. A lot of times they're like, hey, why don't you do a cover? They've been telling bands that from the beginning of music industry, because it gets you into a mainstream audience. It makes you palatable to mainstream, so then they'll listen to your other shit kind of thing. Yeah.
And then they turn around and they do. That's what I respect about Faith No More in general, is that they would do that only so that the rest of the album could be exactly what they wanted.
Right. And it's so it could open up. It's kind of like, it's kind of like what you were asking before. If I go out there and do a fucking, a joke about ice cream, then suddenly everybody's okay. They can hear me shit on fucking corporate America and everything else. Like maybe, but maybe not also. It's all related. I'm sure a number of people couldn't even tell the difference between the Faith No More version of Sunday Morning and the original. But if they could, and they were listening to the Faith No More version, and they were like, "Yeah, this is great," I'm pretty sure that if they listened to the whatever Jen's Letter Making Enemies was like, "Happy birthday, fucker," they wouldn't be into that. Most people who liked Easy Like Sunday Morning would not be like, "Happy birthday, fucker." I love the happy birthday, fucker. So we
live in a bit of a different era now, because when I was a kid, and I'm sure also for you, it's like you hear a song, you go buy the album because of that song, and then now you're invested in that album,
right?
So you listen to it over and over again, and that most of the songs on the album are not the single that you heard on the radio, but they're so like you're strongly invested and incentivized.
Yeah, it's true. There's cognitive dissonance there too. Even the songs that suck, you're like, well, I bought this album, so they're pretty good.
Yeah. Or you find the gems in there. They're like, wow, this really
exactly. This song's even better than the song I heard on the radio or whatever. Yeah,
right. And I mean, like that's true of every metal band I've ever really gotten into. I heard, I don't know, Season in the Abyss, and then you get on that album and you're like, man, War Machine is really that's the song.
Yeah.
Or War Ensemble.
Yeah.
War Machine's a Kiss song, which I also like, but yeah, like that doesn't really exist so much anymore, and it kind of makes me sad. But I do see that in the video game industry still, where you put out a game that is like really palatable, and then people go and they buy your entire back catalog because they're like, oh, I like this guy, or I like this studio, or
from a video game company that do that.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah. 100%.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I probably back in the day, I did that when I was a kid. Like King's Quest was a huge fucking game.
Yeah.
And I played those. Yeah. And then I bought Space Quest, and I bought Leisure Suit Larry and all those things,
To give a recent example is like, New Blood is probably one of the biggest like indie studios making games that I think, I like, as far as like, that kind of retro first person shooter sort of thing, hearkening to like that Doom and Quake audience. But, when they turn around and they say like, hey, we're going to make a horror game that's like a 16-bit top down thing, like what is a game that one of their making? I know I'm kind of talking shit you don't care about, but
no.
Faith is one of their games.
Okay.
And when they do that, they're introducing an entire audience who's joined onto their brand for a specific reason, which is that they like Doom and Quake, and they wanted to play Dusk, which was their flagship game. But the people are so down with the brand, they're like, hey, I trust these people to make good shit. They just buy it because they're like, man, I'm sure it's good. And then they play it and they're like, yeah, I was right. These people are like trustworthy and awesome because they know what's good.
Right. And so it's kind of like, Rockstar Games is a great company, so you buy whatever they release, basically.
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't think that's necessarily true anymore.
Okay. Well, yeah, I don't know. I just know they made GTA. That's
yeah, and they still do, but it's one of those things where it's like Rockstar Games puts out GTA, and then then here we are, GTA 5. We've been sitting on GTA 5 for longer than all of the previous Grand Theft Auto games before it.
I was gonna say.
Yeah.
I only heard about it recently, and I was like, 5? They're only to 5?
And that's the thing, is that the game industry itself has become this games as a service thing and no longer buying a game. So people playing GTA are still getting their money's worth out of it because they're not playing the core game. Let you buy it on PlayStation, you play through the story like you did with every previous game. It's like, we've introduced a new race mode, and there's an in-game currency, and you can use to buy this new DLC, and then you get the
So it's like
downloadable content.
So they've been running with GTA 4, but with different maps and stuff like that, or something.
Well, this is
features?
GTA 5.
Okay, so 5's out already. 5's out, and
it's been out since 10 years ago, man.
That's what I thought. I thought like the last time I played it was probably probably 4 in like 2006 or something like that.
Yeah,
but when I heard 5's been out, they just keep adding stuff to it and never going to 6.
Yes, and they're doing and it's online content. It's like multiplayer and like like team heists or
that's funny.
And they can milk that until the cows come home.
Right.
Or in Bethesda, who made Skyrim, right? Like, so they've had the Elder Scrolls series for as long as I can remember. There was a time before that, but they, instead of making a new Elder Scrolls game, what they keep doing is they sell an updated version on Skyrim on every new console that comes out. It's like, the Veterans Edition or, the Gold Edition or something like that. Or like, we're releasing it on the Nintendo Switch, and then they keep selling, a $60 version of the same game they've made 15 years ago. So what's their incentive to make a new one?
Right.
And, I mean, I respect, like, hey, you can do that, and that does make you money. And I think you are someone who would resonate with this. Like, I value the art over you can still make good money. You can make very good money by valuing the art. Yeah. Instead of milking.
Yeah. That's millions. That's very interesting that there's this incentive that emerged that basically put an obstacle in the way of them creating new versions of the game.
Mm-hmm.
Now, do the graphics significantly improve through 5 over the years, or is it just?
No, I mean 5 is the same game that it's always been. It's just for GTA specifically. Yeah, it's the same game. And it honestly, like when you're talking about different consoles, so Skyrim on the Nintendo Switch is a lesser graphical experience than you would experience on Skyrim on the PS4, perhaps. And then I'm sure that they will, if they haven't already, they probably have, and I'm just not thinking about it. But PS5, they'll release the exact same game, but with just increased graphics, and that's it's exactly the same game with no new content, just a better graphical.
But they can charge people $60 to just upgrade a few things and not actually create a new game, which is what they would charge for a new game. So why not just keep doing that? And so that's basically what they've been locked in, that trap for a decade.
Yep. And that's the AAA gaming industry in a nutshell for you. The other option is to be a game like Fortnite, which is a game as a service, which is like, it's not a story based game. You don't have an end state. You just, you log in every night. You pay for like a membership, a season pass or something like that. You get some like cosmetic things for your characters or like a weapon skin or some shit like that. And then you just play the same thing over and over again. Which, I mean, there's a place for that, but it just doesn't ultimately result in I guess it does actually. It doesn't make me happy, but it clearly makes a lot of people happy enough to throw their money in.
Right. And so maybe you say like, it's not that they shouldn't do what they're doing, but they should also do what they used to do. Create new games.
I wouldn't even say, my therapist told me a long time ago to stop using the word should.
Oh yeah. No, that's a therapist thing to say for a long time.
Yeah.
They've been saying that for 30 years or so. Don't say.
Because when you say should, you set yourself up for an expectation that you
and a disappointment. Right.
Yeah. So I prefer to see things as they are. I don't give a shit what these giant game companies do. The company that I own and also the company that I work for, I will uphold my ethics and my perspective on what is best for art.
Right,
and not
exactly.
just live for it.
And if you live by the values you were just talking about, that they, that you would maybe think that they could have done, not could have done, but could have done. If you do it and it's successful, then they'll all do it to copy the success. So
or they'll continue to make their millions,
yeah,
and I'll be happy making a living, and I will make things I'm proud of, and the people working for those companies will just be like, yeah, well, this is my job. And that's fine too.
Yeah. But the point is, you can, without hoping or whatever, sitting there hoping that they should change or whatever, you just make the game and the type of format for games and progressively building new games instead of just adding to a previous version indefinitely. And by doing that, if you do well with that, then it validates the opinion without having to say should. You just proved that it could do well doing it that way. So it even whether they copy it or not, it is at least doing well for you. And the version everybody I thought liked when a new game came out, when a new version of a game came out, if it was substantially better, which it almost always was with the fucking, all the different things, through the years, every time it was like, holy fuck, new game system, new game of this version, it's part 4 of this or whatever, it's just, I would think that the market has certainly established that the consumer is happy with that model too. So I don't, it's
my entire life is, like I'm a project manager. So I take, I'm trained to do this, from my previous careers. Like, okay, this is what we need to do. So like, what do we need to do to make that happen? We do it. Okay. Now it's done. I see people every day. From my perspective, like from in the Keep's perspective, is like people come to me and they're like, I have a dream to make this kind of game. And if it vibes with me, if it's something that I think is like, yeah, that's a great idea, then I find a way to financially make that happen. And I try my best. And if it works, it works. And it's like, and then I get the most beautiful satisfaction in the world saying like, we made a game that was your vision, that was what you wanted to do, which was, going to vibe with your audience, and no different than what you do with comedy. Is like, I wish that I'm not going to be probably, but if I could be in the comedy industry, I would do the same thing with someone like you. I'd be like, I will find any opportunity I can to try to make what you do and what I think you do, which is special, into something that is like bigger and better and more, I wouldn't say palatable. I'd just say like, we'll find the people that you need to reach. We'll market it to those people. And that's the best route forward, as far as I can tell. And I'm very beyond blossoming. But
I appreciate it. I mean, it's that kind of thing. That's it's hard to, but occasionally people do it. They're occasionally like musicians or comedians or movies or video games that people would say, I would never have fucking thought that would have been successful or popular at all, because it's just
most of them aren't,
right?
The Evil Dead was a failure,
right? And a cult classic after the fact,
and then over time, because it was distributed well, people found it and they're like this, and we're talking about it. It's been 40 years since The Evil Dead came out, and we're both still talking about it. And I feel that way about so many things. Like Vincent Van Gogh was not recognized until he was dead. Right.
And he probably wouldn't have been if he hadn't, injured himself on purpose for love or, the crazy shit of the life or whatever kind of thing. But again, it took some sort of business thing. Like you said, even Evil Dead may have not been successful with its marketing when it came out, but it was successful with its distributing after the fact. And that enabled the cult classic thing to happen, which if they had fucked the distributing up as well, who knows what would have happened,
Well, it's these like bootlegged tapes of it that end up in Germany or whatever. And that's the same thing is true of a lot of punk bands and stuff like that. It's like, the fact that it was not controlled by the corporation who would have been incentivized to like, oh no, you can't have that if you don't buy it, is exactly what allowed that art to permeate through the world and become a commercial success over time. And
true.
I think the same thing is true of all art forms. Like it's not isolated to the film industry. The film industry is extremely expensive, right?
Yeah.
Like you have to spend hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars to make even a very small, low budget movie.
Right, just to get in the game. So it's a high barrier to entry, as the business jerks say.
It costs nothing to make a game, and it costs you nothing to gas money or whatever, but like to show up at a comedy club. And if someone captures it the right way at the right time, then you have something that will last forever. And we have the internet now, so put it out there. And you're doing okay. I mean, like you got like some subscribers on YouTube, but like YouTube is a fucking shit show anyway.
Right.
But,
yeah, it's that's basically where I just put the albums up for free on my YouTube channel, and then on chrisheist.com, and that's basically, it's all free. But it really, it's also the presentation. It's an album. Most people don't listen to stand-up albums. Even the greatest comics in history, you look at their YouTube videos, their albums, when it's just their albums, it's not, it has much lower numbers than their videos. So
well, your clips, right? Or the things that are just like a minute or 5 minutes or whatever of you doing a bit, clearly I'm looking at your channel, like actually numerically do better than
that's the thing. That's why I was considering like trying to do a video for this most recent album. So if we can figure that out. But like it's that kind of thing. Video does better. It's understandable. People are less likely to listen to albums of anything. They watch videos now. It's all about partly the marketing, partly the presentation of things. It's just the nature of video is more entertaining. There's more to it. There's more that people see of what's going on. So it's
easier for me to share like a 1 minute video of you saying "fuck the police" than it is for me to say like, "Hey, listen to this 25-minute album."
Right. Exactly.
And it also like it encapsulates your entire being, right? Like when I see you on stage, that's such a huge part of you as a character, right? Like someone just hearing your voice is not nearly the same as them seeing like, oh, that guy. Like,
right. I guess so. Yeah. I forget sometimes, but I guess so. That's like that's part of it is people say, oh, okay. That kind of, but so that's another reason. Yeah. And generally speaking, comedy specials do way better than albums. Even on YouTube, you have a comic, even a relatively unknown comic, you can put something on YouTube and, if it makes the rounds, but it's easier for people to, like you said, to share, even if it's a longer clip, even if it is a half-hour special or whatever, it's a video. So it's easier. And if it's if it's not totally shittily produced, where you can hear and see it well enough, then people are more inclined to, pass it around.
Yeah, dude. I mean, I genuinely, like, I know it was like a short, very unintimate thing, but like I saw you on stage and I just was inspired. And then I probably wouldn't have talked to you had not the second bar we gone to, you were sitting right next to us. And like, I was just like, I got to talk to this guy. I really felt, your art resonated with me. And I hope that
thanks, man.
Even if it's a very small, unsubstantial amount, like that, what I do can in some way benefit that. And I am Dr. Network. Like that's what I do. So.
Well, I mean, I appreciate it. Yeah. I'm just trying at this point. I'm just trying to, to maybe figure out a way to make a video, whether I have to go to Los Angeles or Tucson or whatever, whatever is easiest and cheapest basically at this point. But it's I appreciate all the fucking A. It's at this point, it's just working on this new material, trying to get it to where it's where I want it to be, and then and then trying to set it in stone, in a either audio or video, and put it out there. And based on the fact that, I mean, that's one of the main impetuses towards doing a video this time, is that I put out 11 of them, and they got nothing. So
they'll still be there when you do make that thing that
it's possible.
A lot of people.
That's possible. Yeah, they'll go back and listen to that. Or
I've recorded and published 130 something podcasts, right? And most of them did garbage. It was just like no one cares, and that's fine. I accepted that. I was like, I'm going to do this because I love it, because I love talking to not just game developers, but people who I find interesting, who are in some way loosely connected to that. Or even in your case, like, I just like this guy and I think we can give him a platform to some extent. But when you do hit that moment where it's like, for me, it was this past year at Realms Deep, where you had that opportunity to reach a lot of people. Suddenly they go back and they find your back catalog, or in the YouTube case, it's like as simple as like a keyword, you put tags in YouTube, that kind of thing. And so some developer who I interviewed before they were ever going to be famous, and then suddenly their game becomes famous and people are searching that word. They're like Ultra Kill would be a good example of a great game that I interviewed their developer early on. And then people start like, oh, there's a new update to that game and it's famous now. And that video's got, 2,000 listens or something like that. That makes a big difference. And it can happen slowly, iteratively over time.
Yeah. That's true. Yeah.
So, yeah. I mean, like I said, man, you've gained at least one fan.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you.
And I hope that translates to a lot of.
I mean, it's like the type of stuff I do has a very limited potential fan base. So I'm happy for anybody that shows up at a show or whatever, or listens to stuff. That's great. But yeah. As far as like the making of things, that's like you said, there's something to the video stuff. The clips I used to use was because I used to have a camera that I used, and I've just been using it audio only for a few years now. So it's been mostly that. But yeah, I want to go back to trying some video stuff.
Do you think that your content as it stands, right? Like the stuff the albums that you put out and everything, does that really like encapsulate you to an extent, or is it like you're still kind of finding it for yourself?
No, I mean, I've been, as far as like what people would call a point of view, you mean? Like that's been fucking there for the whole time.
Yeah.
That's been there for long before I even did stand up. But things constantly, evolve to some extent, but like, it's hard to say, like, do 11 stand-up albums encompass you? Yeah. It's 11 of them. And it's a lot of in-depth perceptions about a lot of different things in very specific fucked up ways. So in that sense, it would definitely encompass, my view on the world and the things in it. But you're constantly making new stuff. So the newer material is definitely is a note in the chord of those things, the other ones, but it's also, there's different things about all of them. And there's things where you would say, oh, he did that bit in this album and then this bit in that album. That seems like a different perception or whatever, or conflicting perception. But that's part of stand-up too, is to fuck with the conceptions of things, like so it could sound like but it's still a consistent point of view. It's just arguing from arguing different aspects of different things. But yeah, the whole thing, if people were to listen, I mean, I'm surprised when anybody listens to a fucking 1 minute clip, let alone a whole album, let alone multiple albums, because it's some dense whatever. It's not it's not easy. It's not just sit back and relax kind of shit or whatever. It's whatever. I don't even know how to explain it, but it's not. Yeah, it's not. I don't know, but it's fucking. It definitely, if I understand the question correctly, definitely reflects my what would be considered non-contemporary worldview. I don't know, fucking some not widely held, but some people, it's one of those things. It's just strange stuff. So they some people, whatever. Some material resonates with people. Other material, they're like, what the fuck? So it's hard to say. I just do, the things that I think of that I think are good, and think, and then move, expand them and add to them, and what I'm trying to say, and they're different in various ways.
I'm confident that when you make your master of puppets, that people are going to go back and find your Kill 'Em All. Like they're
right. That's good. That's good. I feel.
And until you get to your Black album, they're going to continue to do that.
Exactly. When I do the Black album, that's fucking. That's that. I hope I don't. If I never meet whatever. I don't even remember the douche name of the
Bob Rock.
Yeah, that producer. Yeah, but that's the kind of thing that can happen to good writing when somebody's like, you know what, you guys are good, I can make you better, and then it makes them far worse. But it does make them more palatable to other people. So, but I don't think some things shouldn't be. You shouldn't change the artist to make it more palatable. You should change the fucking customer, the consumer, the audience. The audience should be like, you know what? This crazy fucked up shit is way better than fucking this sit on a couch shit.
That's really funny that you bring up Bob Rock, because it was yesterday. I was recording a different podcast. It was with a friend who was talking to a pretty prominent level designer, and one of the things that I said is like, from the perspective of a producer, I don't want to be Bob Rock. I want to be Rick Rubin.
Right. That's a great.
You want to be that. You don't want to be this guy who interjects themselves or tries to like force their creative perspective into the artwork of the person you're working with,
and to make it more tame. That's what he did. He made it so much more tame.
You want to be this guy who facilitates the artist to create exactly what they want to create, and you're just there to help them do it. And that's my philosophy on project management in general.
Fuck yeah. Yeah, Rick Rubin is the man. That's the shit.
Yeah.
That's the way to do it. Yeah. But it's also the band goes, Slayer went to Rick Rubin, Metallica went to Bob Rock.
They actually later went on, with Death Magnetic. I think they worked with Rick Rubin, and that was
okay.
I don't know how that translated. I like that album. I thought it was good, especially compared to all of their Bob Rock shit. Death Magnetic's okay. It's got some flaws, but it's more of like your in the attempt to capture the Metallica of, Ride the Lightning or something like that. It's way more reflective of them trying to be themselves than it is with Load and Reload and with the Saint Anger and the Black Album and all that.
Right. It's also difficulty, especially with music, that when people get older, and especially when they get richer, their music changes. It's just, but it doesn't. I mean, money will have a similar effect in stand-up, but age doesn't. Age seems to make people more fucked up stand-ups. As far as like Pryor and Carlin, and any number of Mortzall, fucking. Once
you're famous, you got nothing to lose, man.
Right.
When you're old, you really got nothing to lose. Like Carlin knew he was going to die.
Right. So it's like, there's that. Once you get to be about 70 or something, you can. I mean, this shit just gets off the rails in such a beautiful way. But yeah, when Slayer's in their 70s, I don't expect their fucking heaviest, fastest, craziest shit, because music is it involves more of a physical thing. You have to play the drums fast. You have to play the guitar fast. There's a thing that a 70-year-old can't as easily do as a 25-year-old. So, but with stand-up, you can keep coming up with crazy ideas as long as you have the mental faculty to do that. So people in their 70s and 80s, and I think Mortzall's in his 90s, he's still fucking, as far as I last heard, he's still spitting shit occasionally. And it's it's that kind of a, but yeah, so that's the one advantage stand-up has, is that as people get older and older, the stand-up gets better. Whereas usually in every other genre of art, it tends to get less awesome. But yeah, you can get Carlin's last shit was just so fucked up. It's so good. and all that, even all of them, fucking, what's it? Yeah. If people, I don't know if people listen to, I mean, there's so many, he's the main example of that though.
Yeah. He's the guy who lived long enough to like really do that.
Right.
Yeah, like Hicks didn't go very long, and neither did Kinnison, and that's unfortunate. But it's just the truth of the matter.
Right, Lenny Bruce as well. Yeah. And Mortzall did, but he was ostracized from the industry by the 70s, I think. So like for the past 50 years, he's just been talking to himself and a handful of other people. He's one of the most famous comics in the world in the 50s and 60s, literally considered the first stand-up comic ever, as far as like the way it is conceived of. in the modern world,
People go back all the way to like Twain or like even.
Oh yeah.
Socrates
And there's people all the stuff. But when it just became a guy standing there having a conversation with the audience, where he wasn't just slinging one-liners and stuff like that, where it was like this new thing. Because before that, there were people that would play an instrument and tell a joke and like short things. But he made this long-form thing that was this different thing that people were like, "What the fuck?" And it influenced everybody and changed the game in a lot of ways. But yeah, so it's and he definitely had the first album I think ever out of it. But point is, then he started like most of the awesome comics at a certain point. I always hear like these guys, the people who are critical of shit, they're like, Lenny Bruce was awesome. And then he started just going on stage and talking about his court case. I'm like, that was the most awesome part. And like when it got really crazy. And like Mort Saul at a certain point, who was friends with Lenny Bruce, and like Mort Saul did that shit like after fucking JFK was killed. Every time Mort Saul was on TV, they would ask him to host the Tonight Show when Johnny was out or whatever. He'd be like, all right. And he'd go on there and be like, so that was fucked up, huh? JFK was assassinated. The CIA did that shit, huh? And he would just go off like, he brought on fucking Garrison to that show. He did a lot of shit that upset the establishment players. And they were like, you're never going to be on TV again. And like, but he said awesome shit you would never hear on TV. He made it happen. But they pushed him out. And yeah, so for the past like 50 years, he's just been increasingly in a more and more, first he was on some obscure television channel in the 80s and then less so in the 90s and then just live shows in the early 2000s and then just a Facebook thing that was, or a Twitter, Periscope live stream. So he's been increasingly ostracized to, now there's like 20 or 30 people occasionally watching him, but he's still one of the best of all time at like 91 or whatever. It's just crazy. So yeah, I guess the whole point of that was that, yeah, music tends to, I would like, Metallica to make a record that's better than Master of Puppets now, but just because of age and wealth, it doesn't seem as likely. But a comic, even with wealth, Carlin had a lot of wealth, but he was still able to fucking tear apart everything. Despite that, but it does affect most people, but age doesn't seem to. So yeah, if comics make it to an old age, that's when some of their best shit can happen. I don't know, fucking A.
He's that guy who held his ethics the entire time, though. Like he was like almost waiting to get to that point in his life where he could just go out there and say whatever the fuck he wanted and people would buy it. And like, he was like, doing his entire life, he had lots of spots and the things that like propelled him into fame, but like those late HBO specials were really just like his magnum opus. And
yeah, he just went like, yeah, completely. Yeah. And he, through the years, whatever, they argue different things or whatever, but I just like the fucked up shit. So it's like, the more, especially cause it's like fucking metal or punk or hardcore or whatever. It's like the most angry, fucked up shit. The best shit. I don't know why. I don't know what it says about my emotional state, but but I also think that that's the best way to find solutions. It may not seem like it, but Carlin and Pryor and Dick Gregory and Mort Saul, Lenny Bruce, and in recent times, Chappelle and Rock and Louis and Stanhope, you can listen to this shit and you can find a lot of solutions to be like, oh, if society's applied these principles, it would improve things, but they refuse to, so it's just like, that's just part of the game is that, these fucking, I'm just fucking rambling at this point.
You've done great, man. We're like closing in all 3 hours. So at this
all right, hell yeah.
You've done great.
Well, thank you for having me. I mean, fucking A.
I've very much enjoyed this conversation.
Same.
I want to do it again in the future when I'm a little more free to speak.
Yeah, hell yeah. Hell yeah.
You've honestly, like you've opened my mind a lot, and I hope to continue to like experience what you do, and I hope that it continues to spread its fingers across the earth.
Well, thanks, man. Fucking A.
And if there's anything I can do to be helpful, you just let me know.
I appreciate it, man. Thanks again. Thanks for everything. Yeah.
Thank you very much once again to Chris. He's absolutely fucking awesome. Exactly what I expected. And I hope you guys go check him out. You can find his stuff on YouTube or at chrisheist.com. That's Chris, Heist. I hope I got that right, .com. And yeah, he's an amazing comic and a really, really just brilliant mind. And I respect him tremendously, obviously. That's why I spent 2.5 hours picking the guy's brain. And given how fucked up the conversation got, the only appropriate thing to do, music-wise, was to have our beloved Amorpher here. So this is a track off of Vestigial Processes. You can find Amorpher over on Bandcamp, and I'll make sure to continue to always tout him out as much as I can. Definitely want to say thank you to the people who support us. You know who you are, but I'll read your names off because I love you. Shannon, Ben, Bridge, Anthony, Mike, Zan, Lord Revan, Fred, Brandy, Jack, Robert, Graceless Dragon, Red Eyes, Brad, Dots, Moose, Paul, the Flam Fam, y'all know who y'all are, and of course, Greg Simon, who often contributes to the show, and of course, Immorpher, who is the person you're hearing right now in this wonderful music. If you are interested in supporting In The Keep, head over to inthekeep.com. There's all kinds of ways. I'm not going to talk ad nauseum about that right now because I just want to, finish my day. I love you. The Drowned God Cathala loves you. Until next time, stay in the keep.